Hello, good evening, and welcome to a Script Note special. It's been a couple of weeks since we did a Script Notes, and it's been about a month since we did a Script Note special, and we spoke to Steve. That will be up on YouTube anytime now, I promise. But we're tearing our way through TPI employees, as I'm joined today by Father Benjamin. Hi Ben, how you doing?
Hello, I'm very good. How are you two?
Yeah, not too bad. You'll have noticed that we are down a goose. Navian will be joining us as soon as possible. It's been a little bit delayed by another commitment, but they will be very soon. Yeah, Ben, thank you for joining us. It's good to have you with us. We'll probably not be talking for as long as we spoke to Steve a few weeks ago, but thank you still, nonetheless, for giving me your time. Have you had a good day?
Yeah, I'm actually. I play D&D on Monday evenings, which is a bit of a novelty for me because I've been a forever DM for like the last 4 years or something with this group. So every campaign I'd be like, "Does someone else want to have a go now?" And no one ever offered. So this time I was like, "Guys, it really is time for someone else to have a go." So I'm actually getting to play, and I'm playing a Dragonborn Paladin, which is like out of my comfort zone because I normally play casters and bards and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm loving kicking down doors and smashing bandits in the face with my big sword.
I know
and that's what I've been doing
feeling.
today.
I know that feeling. I've one of my campaigns is coming to an end that I've been running for probably about 4 years now. It was
Wow.
it's been a first through beyond 20th level campaign, 20th plus an epic boon.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I originally played it. I took over from the last DM at 3rd level, so it's been mostly me.
It's pretty rare that people get that far as well, isn't it?
It
I
really
remember
is.
someone saying that on it's D&D Beyond. That's like the app where you get all the cool features and stuff, but it includes a character builder, right? I remember someone saying that there's a statistic on there where it's like they've tracked the levels of the various characters that have been made, and it's or the numbers of each one, and obviously way more level 1 characters have been made than anything else, and then it's just a line graph that goes slowly down until you get to 20 and then shoots back up again, which is presumably just people making a level 20 character so they can.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played beyond like 6th, maybe. We have Navian. Hi, Navian. How you doing?
Tired.
Hello.
Yeah. I hope everything's going all right with you. In any case, yeah, we're not here to talk about RPGs, although I'm sure, Ben, we absolutely could. We could absolutely fill 2 hours talking about
without doubt.
talking about RPGs, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about Clock Tower. But I think that you, of all people we've spoken to, had quite a unique route into Clock Tower. Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Tell us about it.
How I got involved?
Yeah.
So when in the summer of 2017, I think, I was trying to get my games journalism career off the ground, and I was managing a board game cafe to pay the rent. And one of our favorite things to do at this cafe was after business had closed, we'd all kind of hang around, get a few beers, and play social deduction games like Werewolf and Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, and stuff like that. And we all decided to go to the UK Games Expo 2017 together as a big group. And I naturally looked up what interesting social deduction games were going to be there. And that's when I learned about Blood on the Clock Tower, a game where no one's like eliminated and the storyteller can lie to the players. And I was like, this must suck. That can't possibly be balanced. Well, I went there and I told them how excited how exciting I thought the core concept was. And I kept coming back to play over and over again all weekend. And they must have liked me because at the end, when I asked if I could get involved, they were like, well, you live in the middle of the UK, you go to conventions because you're a journalist, and you manage a board game cafe. You seem like a sensible choice to be our person in the UK with a prototype copy. And obviously I accepted. And 3 weeks later, a prototype copy of Clock Tower, which I still have and I will never get rid of, arrived in the post. And then when they kickstarted it and asked for 60 grand and got 600 grand, I was like, I'm going to have a piece of this pie. So I contacted them and asked if they needed a community manager. And here I am, 5 years later?
So, so who was that brought the game over? Were you joined by the Aussies?
So at the UK Games Expo, it was 2 Aussies, one of whom was Evan, who many of you probably know. But the game itself was mailed over, so it was just what I assume must have been a very expensive, very heavy bit of mail.
So you said that was in like 2017 that you first.
I might be getting the timeline wrong, but I believe how it went was I went to the UK Games Expo in the summer of 2017, and then the game was kickstarted around, I want to say, April 2018.
Sure.
Does that sound about right?
I'm
pretty terrible with stuff like this.
I think it had been recently done with kickstarting by the time that I got on board the game. Would have been early 2020, I think.
Tell you what, we could just look when the very first Kickstarter update was on the website.
I'm pretty sure that Kickstarter would still have been live in 2019 when Navian and
I, the video. I might be a year behind or a year earlier and everything.
Yeah, I think it was 2019.
Let's see, here we go. The first ever Kickstarter update, March 28th, 2019. Yeah, so there we go. I must have gone to the UKGE in 2018, and then the game kickstarted in 2019. Wow, feels like a lot longer ago than that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been a long couple of years for you.
I mean, it's been a completely life-changing couple of years for so many people, right? It's weird just to think about the like 2 years we all just basically stayed indoors. It's strange. That experience is gonna be written about in history books when we're old and grey, I think.
You mean the 2020 pandemic?
Yeah, the pandemic. It just changed so many things. It didn't just change. I mean, it had a very real effect on every industry, including ours. Like shipping costs went sky high. Most board games are produced in China, and so obviously they were hit very hard. But I think it changed like everybody's attitudes to some degree. Really, I think a lot of people became a lot more conscious of hygiene and things like that.
Yeah. Hopefully, it will provoke some positive behaviors going forward in case we ever end up in a similar situation.
Hopefully, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm diverting you away from the one subject.
We started on RPGs. We've moved to healthcare policy.
So we're taking the scenic route.
We might talk about board games at some point. I don't know if you remember I don't know if we've talked about it in the past, Ben, but I know that Navian and I both came into Clocktower from the same route, which was a video on YouTube that was the Dicebreaker.
Yes, Dicebreaker.
So, as with a great many people, it was some content that you put on YouTube that got Navian and I, both of us, hooked on Clocktower in the long.
Notably, though, it was about a year after the video got published because, quite frankly, the sound quality was really, really bad.
Yeah.
And so both Alejo and I, when we first came across it, were like, oh, this is too bad. I'm just going to skip this. But then the pandemic hit and we all kind of, ran out of like all your backlogs of stuff on YouTube to watch. So you start going even further back. And the both of us did the same thing, which is like, I gave this a shot. I know the audio is really bad, but like, let's try this again and actually pay attention this time. And then we noticed like, oh, this video quality sucks, but this game is fantastic. I need more.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Dicebreaker is owned by Eurogamer, and Eurogamer is a really they own a lot of like gaming related websites, review pages and stuff like that, and they're based in Bath, which is in southern England. And because Eurogamer owned loads of different websites, and because I had been trying for a long time to break into that industry, I'd actually been for 3 job interviews at the Eurogamer offices. So coming to run Clocktower was a 4th time I came down there. And so I kind of knew like 4 or 5 people, like the guy who works the front desk and a few other people I'd spoken to quite a few times before. So it's kind of weird how the almost the role had changed. Like the first few times I was there, I was this wide-eyed kid desperately wanting to break into this industry, and then the 4th time I was a guy who'd been invited down to run games for people. But I remember them saying that they couldn't find the necessary lapel mics or whatever, and that we'd just have to sort of suck it up and do it with a couple of microphones. And I knew at the time that the audio was going to suck, but I was like, well, there's no such thing as bad exposure when it comes to this sort of thing.
Well, it got us in, so I guess so.
And a fair few others. And also, it was nice to meet Wheels and the crew.
Sure.
Some of I've read their work many times before, but I hadn't actually met any of them. So it was a fun experience for me. I have to give a shout out to Christian as well, who is one of the early Clocktower. He was the person who got the second UK prototype Grimoire, because Christian's the person who actually scored that game for us, Dicebreaker, because a few of the Dicebreaker writers had come to a Clocktower live show that Christian had put on in London, where he had like 8 or 9 actors play Clocktower on a stage, and instead of them voting, the audience would vote.
Okay.
Which was an interesting little quirk, yeah.
Did that play well?
It played very well. It sold out for a start, which is always promising. But yeah, he would basically just sweep his arm across the sort of room and sort of gauge whether or not it had gotten more than half votes or more than the other person's votes or whatever. But yeah, it was interesting, and it was a little different. But I think the audience participation thing is a lot of fun. People like that kind of thing, and I could totally see that happening or that working in the future.
A question that I think that only Navian and I will, and maybe a few other people will reasonably care about, but is there any chance of another collaboration with the Dicebreaker crew? Maybe with the Outside Xbox and Johnny Chiodini?
I'd absolutely love to work with Dicebreaker again, and any offer they make me to do any Clocktower related stuff with them, I'll say yes to. But honestly, you'd have to ask them, because I can't possibly sign off on something like that.
Well,
I feel like if you could get Johnny along, they would really enjoy being a storyteller.
For sure.
Yeah, well, hey, if you're a Dicebreaker enthusiast and you're listening to this, go and let them know that you want to see that happen.
Yeah. So moving on from that specific thing, I guess, but how has it been going from being somebody running a board game cafe in the Midlands to, not to put too fine a point on it, but a minor internet celebrity?
It's difficult to say, really. I mean, obviously, I am incredibly flattered that I'm amazed that anybody wants to sit and watch me do anything, to be honest with you. And the fact that I get people coming up to me at conventions saying, "Hey, your videos got me through lockdown," or "Hey, I didn't used to have any friends, and now I've got a really big friendship circle because you encouraged me to get into Clocktower." When you hear things like that, it's just insanely humbling, and I'm incredibly lucky to be able to experience that. It also does have its more surreal moments, though. Like, a guy sent me a photo of him dressed up as me for Halloween, which was the funny thing was as well. He was clearly a healthier man than me. He had like a slim body, and it almost kind of looked like if I had like a brother who didn't drink as much beer, he might look like that. But and then obviously, there is I'm not going to lie, there are some things about it that aren't good. Like, I can go on any YouTube video with me in it and see some really horrible things said about me. And I sometimes get some pretty gross DMs on various social media, or at the very least, some pretty nasty ones. So, it's all swings and roundabouts. But I think anybody who works whose job involves them being in the public eye, you have to learn to deal with that, or otherwise you just stop doing it. Right at the end of the day, if I hadn't learned to ignore all that nastiness and just cherish the good things, I would have wilted long ago and gone back to pulling pints in a pub or something.
Sure. We don't have your level of visibility, but like anyone who appears kind of in a public eye in a sort of way that you are visible, but like aren't directly interacting with people, you're always going to get some nonsense from people, I guess.
Yeah. And also just an unfortunate fact, right? If you take any slice of 100 human beings, at least one or two of them is inevitably just going to be not a very nice person. That's just laws of averages. And so if 250,000 people watch a YouTube video on No Rolls Barred with me in it, at least 250 of them are probably going to be assholes. Can I swear on this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, at least a good number of them are going to be, not very nice people, and that's just the way the world is. And you've just not don't let the bastards get you down. That's the
you got to look at the 249,000 who aren't.
Yeah.
It must be it must be a really weird position for you, just in general, really, managing a community of the size that this is starting to grow towards.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm very, very proud of the Clock Tower community. It obviously it has its bad guys, just like every community does, but I don't think there are many communities that are quite as inclusive and that have as many good ambassadors for it as we do. If you were to go and, let's say, play Magic the Gathering, or even, popular RPGs like D&D, it's a random convention or something like that, there will be a lot of nice people there who, probably really friendly and have a good time, but I haven't seen in other communities the level of desire to nurture new players and gently bring them into the game like we do in the Clock Tower community. There's the vast majority of the servers and smaller communities that I've seen are very, very concerned with ensuring that someone's first experience is a not too large trouble brewing, and that they're eased into the community and they have all the someone all the time I'm seeing people say things like, hey, new guy, just so you know, I might lie to you about what I am, but I'll never lie to you about the game's mechanics. And you just see this all the time, and it's just incredibly awesome to know that not only am I part of that community, but I have the incredible fortune to have a hand in creating it and in kind of setting the standard for how someone should conduct themselves in a game of Clock Tower.
I can speak to the unofficial. We have people like, I don't know if you know Cosmo, has run a bunch of new player-friendly games.
Yeah.
Someone called Bees has taken to doing that quite a lot recently. Those two are two awesome people. Nadine, I know that on Connecticut you've got Jackie doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, every Wednesday night we have a whole night that's dedicated to just playing Trouble Brewing, both for people who have played before, because Trouble Brewing is just a classic, but it's definitely like aimed and designed to be beginner friendly and to get some new players in.
Yeah. Bees has games every Saturday. I think Jackie has games on Wednesdays. Yeah,
Wednesday night.
That's fantastic.
Ben Dance, obviously the angel fable storyteller for a reason. There are some great and welcoming people in the community that I think definitely deserve a shout out in that way.
Yeah, and Cosmo actually came third place in the World Cup. Their scripts, really? I believe, was Advanced Donjons and Demons. Yeah, and Cosmo also was the person who created the bracket for it and updated it every round.
Well, that's a good segue, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Before we do move on, though, talking about the World Cup, there's one question that I always like to ask people when they come on. I think a lot of people might know your answer to this one, but let's ask you anyway. What's the base script?
Oof, I mean, that's a difficult one to answer. My favorite base script is Bad Moon Rising. Do I think it's the best base script? No, not really. To be honest with you, I mean, like the things that if some, let's say for example, if you were to say to me, hey, I'm bringing my friend to England for a few days, and I want to show them the best British food. Now, my favorite British food might be some like weird, horrible, I don't know, liver and onions or something. But I wouldn't say therefore that one is objectively the best one. I would say no, get them some fish and chips, or take them for a proper British curry or something like that. Because I am aware that while I really like Bad Moon Rising, it's because it appeals specifically to things that I like, not because it is objectively the best script, which I think we can all agree is Trouble Brewing. It's by far the most balanced. It's the one that you can play with almost anybody. It continues to bring up surprises and edge cases for me, even after 10 bajillion games running it and playing it. So I think the best one's TB, but my favorite remains BMR.
Totox was expecting to say Midnight at the House of the Damned.
Midnight in the House of the Damned is a really good script.
Wow.
I'm just putting that out there right now. I've had the pleasure of playing it a bunch of times, and I'll put it this way: it appeals to me for the same reason that BMR does.
Yeah. That is very much a discussion for the future. But of the base three,
yeah,
your favorite is BMR, but TB you think is the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people say that TB is the best script. Some people, as you have said, maybe I prefer this one, the SMV or BMR. But yeah, I mean, TB is, I think, the most popular script.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know people that just don't want to play the other ones, which I kind of totally get. Like, if you have a bad experience your first time playing SMV or BMR, I can totally see that kind of ruining it for you. Whereas a bad game of TB is still almost certainly going to go at least most of the distance, and you're at least going to 100% understand what went wrong and why you had a bad game.
Either that or the Slayer shot the demon right at the start. But that's just funny.
Yeah. I try to avoid those situations when I run for new players.
Yeah.
That's why you put a Scarlet Woman in.
And not
absolutely.
A Slayer.
And not a Slayer or a Saint.
All right, let's talk about the World Cup. And let's talk about the World Cup as it was from your perspective. How was it to organize? How was it to run? Yeah, how was it? How do you think it's been? Do you think it's been a success?
I think that it's been a reasonable success. I think that there are a lot of things that I will do differently if we have another World Cup. So if we just go back to was it 2021 when we started doing this? I feel like it
22,
was.
I think.
22, yeah.
Was it early 22? Yeah. So we just had the I'm loath to call it this, but the soccer European Cup, European Championships, or the Euros as we call them. And I was watching it thinking, oh man, this is so cool. What would the Clock Tower Euros look like? And so I thought, hey, that could be really interesting. Let's get like 32 scripts or 64 scripts or something, and just have them play against one another, and have the audience, have the fans on Twitch decide which one was best, and then that makes it through to the next round, and we decide which one the best one is. And when I presented that idea to the rest of the people in the sort of that help organize the streams, half of them were like, "That's brilliant," and the other half of them were like, "That's terrible." And the half that said it was terrible. God, I wish I could remember who made these suggestions, because whoever you are,
taken around the back and shot.
no, quite the opposite. I'm really sorry to the people who suggested this, because you deserve all the credit for this. But they said we've already had a bunch of script contests, and while they've been fun, it doesn't actually promote good script building, because what you do is someone sends you a script that they've made this week, and everyone does that, and then you pick a script that's probably not been tested at all, and that's the opposite of good script building. Good script building is about having a cool idea, testing it, iterating on it, testing it again, iterating on it again, and doing that continually for months and months until you have a really tight script that almost always gives a balanced and fun game. And they said, if you're going to do a competition, you should do something that promotes that. And that then made me think, oh well, when teams go to an international tournament, they take 23 players with them and change the squad around from game to game to counter what works and what doesn't and that kind of thing. So let's have it that after every round, the winners hand in another draft of the script, and that I think most people would agree has promoted the idea of good script building, and that the scripts that won did improve over the course of the tournament.
I love that aspect of the script competition. I think that different competitions and how you structure them can definitely feature different things, and they'll have different goals as a result, right? You could have a script contest about hey, give us your already most tested and most polished scripts, and we'll decide what's best among those, which is one type of contest. But I really, really loved the aspect of the World Cup that was about improving your script, because that's what script building really is, right? Yes, you can sit down and you can write a script, but if you never play it and if you never test it, you don't actually know how that's going to function beyond theoretically. And because there's a difference between theoretical functioning and in practice functioning. So getting to see it in practice and then being able to respond to that really shows that script building is a skill. It's a skill that you can build up over time. Nobody's really just suddenly born in Clock Tower and they're a brilliant script writer immediately. It comes through that trial and error process, and that paying attention to what the storyteller choices, even from picking the characters, are all the way through the game, and paying attention to the players and how they're responding to things, and sort of reacting to that by changing your scripts and, yes, hopefully making it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ultimately, if there's one thing that we should be doing on the streams, it's promoting quality storytelling. And a well-balanced script is the weapon that's wielded by the storyteller to this metaphor's getting a bit weird. Let's say the tools that the good storyteller has to run a good game, right? You can't polish a turd. If the script is not good, then the game is almost certainly not going to be good.
Yeah, there's also a distinction that we've had drawn a couple of times on this podcast, talking about the distinction between scripts to be run once and scripts to be run again and again and again. And this sort of competition, your usual build as a script featuring this character, you've got currently for the Organ Grinder, we'll talk about that later, is going to be build as a script that makes the Organ Grinder look. Whereas this has really promoted a script that can be played as many times as you want.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there are times when a script should be built with just one game in mind. I mean, when I run games for No Rolls Barred, I'll often just think, hey, what characters do I really want to see in this particular episode? Which ones haven't we seen already? Things like that. And I'll construct a script already knowing in advance exactly what 10 or 11 characters are going to be in play, so that I don't really have to worry too much about all the other ones, as long as it, hits all the points of it has some outsider manipulation and the demons can hide and all that kind of stuff. So there is a place for scripts that are meant to be used and thrown away, but that's certainly not, I would say, what most people should be looking to do when they build a script.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And when we talked about the finalist scripts, we very much contrasted Boozling, which is the one that ended up winning. Congratulations to Low, with Out of Evil as being an interesting look. I think I've still got the tab open so we can compare the two. But being an interesting look at one script being really good to play once or twice, and one script being really good to play again and again and again. I mean, you run both of these scripts. Do you think that's fair, Ben?
I mean, I would say Out of Evil has a lot of very difficult to run, difficult to play complicated characters on it, such as the Heretic, the Poppy Grower, the Fearmonger. These are all characters that can completely shake up the way people play the game, and consequently there's a higher chance of it derailing and you having a very quick game that ends very early. Whereas Boozling is, I don't want to say it's more balanced than Out at Evil, because I don't really know whether that's true or not, but it certainly is simpler to run and simpler to play. And I think that means it's going to guarantee that most of the games that you run with it are going to be at least decent. Out at Evil has probably a potential to have a game that is just amazing. Oh my God, I've never seen interactions like this before. This game will go down in history as a legendary game because of all these complicated and crazy characters. But because it is able to provide that level of crazy awesome, it also probably is able to provide that level of like crappy awesome as well, because it works both ways, right?
Yeah, I think what I said about it was that Boozling will be like more of a steady script, which makes it more palatable for doing that. Like, let's just play this over and over and over. But out at Evil, you get the more explosive games, and those can be sort of like in a vacuum. More fun to be had, but like you were saying, it's got all of these difficult and game-changing roles that can kind of exhaust people. And I don't mean that like necessarily in a bad way, although sometimes it can get to that point. But because it's more explosive, it's sort of like, here's a little treat that we'll have every once in a while,
Yeah, definitely, because you can't guarantee that it's going to go the distance. And despite what some people say, that is ultimately what the storyteller's trying to do, right? It's true that the storyteller wins when everyone has fun, but everyone has fun when the storyteller is able to run a full game that goes, preferably at least most of the way to Final 3.
I think for the most part, I think there are times when you kind of have to just like abandon a game because it's clear that no one's having fun. But generally, I like to look at it that the storyteller's job is to create an interesting experience for everybody at the table. That is definitely helped by a game that goes right down to the wire. But it's not always going to be the case that people like, for instance, just to pull an example out of nowhere, if you've got a demon on the block and everybody knows that player is a demon, but you could technically execute a player with the Serenovus ability and keep the game going for another day, knowing full well that the demon will still be executed tomorrow. It might just be better to let that one go and try again. But generally speaking, yeah, I
agree. Yeah, totally agree with you there. But of course, if the demon is an imp and they can pass that thing off, please do execute the Serenovus block breaking player.
Of course. Just sort of general thoughts, I guess. But yeah, we'll go back to talking about Boozling in a second. But just to talk about the structure of the World Cup again, we had a question, which was obviously the sort of thing that I was planning on asking you, but Flying Ludicolo gave me a whole bunch of questions, so I might as well phrase it as they have been. If we were to run another one, what do you think you would probably want to change? Like, what immediately strikes you as being something that you would change? I think one of the most obvious things is just the length of it. Do you think you would have one fewer round, and that would be like half the games?
I think that the length of it was a two-pronged issue. The first of them was the sheer number of games. The second of them was how long it took to get through each round. I think I made a mistake by thinking, we'll do round one and then we'll take a little break, and then we'll do round two and then we'll take a little break. And actually what ended up happening was any like hype and excitement for the World Cup just like came and then went and then came and then went. And I think by the end it wasn't so much a crescendo as it would have been had we just gone, right, this month is World Cup month, we're smashing out all the games over the course of a month and just have the entire schedule planned out before we even run the first game. And I think, the other issue was there was just too many scripts. Like 64 scripts is just too many.
There were a lot. And, there were a lot to sort through even to get it down to the 64 that we started with.
Yeah, there were just a stupid number of scripts. And I think if we were to do it again...
scripts, everyone.
If we were going to do it again, what I'd probably do is I'd do exactly what the Football World Cup does and just have, I don't know, 24 or 32 or something, and separate them into groups of 4 and have each script. Because another thing that was unfair was if 2 great scripts come up against each other, the one that's slightly greater has knocked out another one that probably deserves to make it through several more rounds. So what I'll probably do next time is put them into like groups of 4 and have them play each other once in the group. So, script A versus script B, while script C plays script D, and the next week A plays C and B plays D, etc., etc. So the first round, it actually gives every script 3 games and gives every script a chance to iterate and get a little bit better. And then maybe the winner of each group goes through to like a 16 script or 8 script knockout. And that way you get... every script gets more of a chance, and it's not going to take as long, and it's easier to track.
I'm going to say right now that I really like that idea, and I would love to see that be the structure that we try next time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very surprised if it isn't, honestly. There's a reason why they do that for the Football World Cup and all the football tournaments. It's because it works and it's fair.
Yeah. I think Nadine's script and my script both got eliminated in the first round, so it would be good for people in that boat as well to see the script played a few more times. Although, to be fair, my script was Storyteller's Nightmare, so...
All right, yeah. Did that actually make it through to round 1?
It did. If we'd had one fewer round, my script would have been the highest rated script to not make it. It was the 33rd seed.
Wow, 33rd? That's 33rd wow. That's impressive. Yeah, that's impressive.
I'm gonna hit you with some questions as they come in, even if they're not related to what we're talking about.
Go for it.
And then come back to what we were talking about. Question from Caffeine Boost. What would you say is a good progression of base scripts, and I think by implication, other well-known custom scripts to run before starting to run your own scripts?
Well, obviously, start with Trouble Brewing. The big debate is, do you move from TB to Bad Moon Rising or Sects and Violets? I have some pretty strong opinions on that, but I'll preface them by explaining how I feel about those scripts. So, in my opinion, Bad Moon Rising is harder to run than Sects and Violets. Not because the characters are as complicated. In fact, there's less mechanics because there's no madness in Bad Moon Rising. But there is a lot going on. There's a lot of weirdness that can happen in the night phase. You're generally going to be waking up more people in the night phase, at least from night 2 onwards. And most importantly, crucially, in Bad Moon Rising, you have to make a lot more game-changing decisions as a storyteller for BMR than you do for SMV. Now, SMV obviously is, in my opinion, it's easier to run, even though you have to contend with madness and things like that. And not just that, I think it's going to be more enjoyable to a bunch of new players, because if you throw a bunch of, it's their let's say 8th or 9th game, and you throw them into Bad Moon Rising, yeah, they'll understand what their character does. They'll read kill 2 people each night, and one of them might get vomited up tomorrow, or make a public statement and this and this. They'll understand what the words mean, but they won't be able, with their lack of experience, to equate the things that are happening with actual actionable information. They were like, oh, okay, 3 people died in the night. What does that mean then? Why aren't any of these characters getting any information except the grandmother and the chambermaid? You have to have the experience of having played lots of Clock Tower to be able to take the weird, chaotic seeming things that are happening in BMR and turn them into something that you can actually use as a player. And that's why I would always recommend going from TB to SMV, because while in SMV the players are going to have to learn about madness, in actuality the way the characters function is a lot more intuitive, I think, and it's a lot more, okay, you get some information if you do this thing. There's a lot less of you having to kill yourself or other people to get info, and you have to read a lot less into living and dying to get useful info. So yeah, in my opinion, SMV is the one that you should go to after TB.
Well, thank you, thank you very much. I think Emma seems to disagree with you, but we can have that discussion.
Well,
sure.
hey,
I think,
yeah, that is just my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's, and obviously all groups will be different, right?
Yeah, I think, and I had this discussion with somebody earlier, but I think that SMV as a player, if you've got an all new group of players, it's probably better to go to SMV after TB because it's more similar to TB.
Yeah,
and you don't need to get your head around that much beyond Serenovus and Mutant. Whereas with BMR, there's a whole bunch of things that can't happen in TB that can suddenly happen. But if you have a mixed group of some new players and some veterans, and the veterans are not the sort of dominant type, but that they're willing to take it slow and explain it to everybody, they can probably help the newer players familiarize themselves with everything that can happen in BMR, whereas the new players might still be confused in SMV. So I think that if you've got an all-new group, SMV is probably easier. If you've got a mixed group, BMR is probably easier.
Yeah, I can vibe with that. That's a respectable opinion. I don't know if I 100% agree with it, but I can totally get why you've arrived at that. I think also we're talking very hypothetically here, but the truth is, it matters what characters you put in, right?
Sure.
Because if I run SMV for a group of relatively new players, just as I do with Trouble Brewing, I'll pretty much always run the same setup. I'll explain Madness and explain how it works and answer any questions, and then I won't put the Mutant or the Serenovus in the bag. I'll pretty much always run the No Dashi because the demon playing the No Dashi doesn't have to think about anything other than who they're going to kill. So as far as they're concerned, it's just an imp that makes people poisoned. And I'll avoid putting the Snake Charmer in because that can be very overwhelming. And I won't put the Mathematician in or anything that tracks who nominates and who votes. And that way, you've basically got Trouble Brewing. Take what you've learned from Trouble Brewing and apply it to these new characters.
Yeah. And then you're playing a massive game, so you have to put in either the Pit Hag or the Serenovus. The Pit Hag misunderstands what you were saying and creates exclusively evil demons for the entire game.
I've had some pretty entertaining Pit Hag situations with new players. I had one guy who had played like 2 games of Trouble Brewing, and he was the Pit Hag in an SMV, and he turned his own demon into what was it? The Seamstress. He turned his own demon into the Seamstress. And when I was like, this is an in-person game as well, so it's the night phase, and I'm trying to signal to this guy that this is his demon, and he's just looking at me confused. And after about 20 seconds of trying to mime to him, I was just like, all right, screw it. Wake up, everyone. Good teams won. And his response was, I wanted him to know what players were on the same team as him. which is just, there's so much to unpack there. But yeah, I felt pretty bad for the guy. I had another new player who once just he was the Pit Hag, and he was like making people into useful townsfolk.
Yeah.
And which is, I guess he's feeling it out. But I took him aside and I was like, hey, listen, I feel like you're a little aimless with this character. And he's like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. I was like, well, look, here's the two things that are often done with Pit Hags. Either turn townsfolk into useless outsiders, or you can change around what minions and demons are in play on your own team. And if your demon gets in trouble, you can make someone else into a demon so that your demon can now die. And he just took that last one to heart and just over the next 3 nights made 4 demons.
Yeah, that's the game I was in. That
Jack would be proud.
Oh yeah, you were there, weren't you? Yeah, that was pretty funny.
I think it's a woman though, not a gentleman. I'm not certain.
Was it not? I thought it was a guy. I don't know. Maybe I misremembered. I was quite drunk at the time, to be fair.
Yeah, you were. But yeah, no, I for that game, I had pretty much figured it out by day 2, but I didn't want to I didn't want to really push too hard on it because it's an entirely group of new players. I want them to be the ones solving it, but I'm like, So I'm just like, it's possible that this person is the Nodashi, and it's possible that's why this is happening. So we execute that person, and then we go to night, and the game continues because we've got twins in the game, and nothing changes. Nobody dies because the demon's dead. So we're like, okay, so that could be, they could have sunk. We could be looking at twins. There's various different things that could have happened. And then the next night, we go to night again, and then 2 players die. And I'm like, okay, we've had a demon change. Good to know. And then we go to night again, and one of the twins dies because the other twin has been turned into a demon. And then just another player dies, and it's the other twin. And by the final day, I'm just waking up like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah, that was at Strange Games, Ian.
Strange Games. What a convention that is as well.
Such a weird
So
game.
a strange game at Strange Games is what you're saying.
Very much so. Nivian, what do you think is the best script to go to after TB? Just go back to the question.
So I think it depends on a few different things. It depends on the experience level of the storyteller, in my opinion, and it depends on what it is that your group seems to be vibing with when they play TB. So I've heard this said before, and I do kind of generally agree with it. If you have a group that seems to rely a lot more on some of the social aspects of the game, they're making social reads, they're pushing on social information rather than, their mechanical stuff, then maybe you want to consider moving them to BMR. Because yes, one of the things about BMR is that there is about 5 or 6 different reasons for any given player to die or not die during the day or during the night. And as a result, a lot of people play BMR a lot more socially, right? You get the social reads on who wants to die during the day, when, and what happens after. And, you get some amount of inferred information from who dies at night, but there's so many possibilities that when you first start BMR, that can be overwhelming for players to sort through. So they rely a lot on the social aspect of it. If you have players who are really, really enjoying the mechanical aspects of the game, the information that they're getting in Trouble Brewing, then moving to Sex and Violets next is a really great choice because there's a lot of information rolls on Trouble Brewing. There's a lot of information rolls on Sex and Violets. In a certain way, that aspect it parallels TB a lot more than anything in BMR does in TB, right? It's here. There's several information rolls on Trouble Brewing, and then Sex and Violets is all about information. So, so that's for what your players are vibing with. As a storyteller, what you can take into consideration for your own experience level is, if you're a less experienced storyteller, you're probably going to have in general an easier time moving to Sex and Violets next. You have some amount of experience in Trouble Brewing with misinformation in the form of the poisoner and the drunk. And hopefully by the time you as a storyteller are ready to move on to storytelling more scripts, you'll have story told with poisoners and drunks plenty of times so that you have gotten somewhat of a feel for how to manage that, because that's a skill that storytellers build up over time. Is what do I play? What do I show this drunk or poison player at any given time? What supports the poison or the drunkenness the most? Because there's more of that can come in S&V, right? You have Vortox as an entire demon that makes all the townsfolk info wrong, and you have a couple of different other sources of poisoning and drunkenness. So there's definitely things in S&V that are that bump up the difficulty for a storyteller in the forms of that misinformation. I think Dreamer is especially it looks easy to run, but actually it's very nuanced and difficult to get the right handle on for what to show the wrong role as when. And Savant is, of course, very intimidating for a lot of newer storytellers. And those are things that, you can build up your skill in there at as you do it. But you're going to be set up for being able to at least do some of that misinformation until you get a feel for how that misinformation works specifically within S&V, coming from, the information roles in TB. if you're a more experienced storyteller and you're already used to the fact that this game has a lot of moving parts, then I think you're going to do fine going to BMR next, because while the misinformation in S&B can have a really big impact on the game, it's still a more straightforward information script most of the time. Whereas in BMR, there's a lot of minor mechanical moving parts there that are easy to mess up as a storyteller. And there's still a lot of storyteller influence on BMR. In fact, in general, I think BMR has the most storyteller influence involved, right? Who am I making drunk from the sailor? Who am I making drunk from the innkeeper? Which player is being gossip killed? Who am I regurgitating and on what night? You know, there's a lot of stuff that has a really, really major impact as a storyteller. So I really think that you can go either way, and you just need to analyze your situation and feel out, like, what are my players ready for? What do they like about the game? What am I ready for? What do I like about the game as a storyteller? You know, where are my storyteller strengths? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that. That all makes total sense. And I mean, you make a good point about, I suppose it's easy for me to sit here and say, oh, you know, you don't have to do too many big decisions in SMV, but it's easy for me to say that because I've run SMV a million times and I'm not afraid when it comes to giving out Dreamer info. I relish the opportunity to give out Savant info, but I appreciate someone who's about to run their 9th or 10th game. That's obviously not going to be the case.
Yes, there you have Caffeine. You have Caffeine Boost. You have several different perspectives on where you and your group should go. A lot of different options. Whatever you think is right for you, try them both. What's the worst that can happen?
Or combine them into one giant nightmare script.
Oh my god! you could absolutely play Fish Bucket if you want to. Don't, but you could. Cool. To get back to the World Cup, another question that I got was: are there any games that really stand out to you that you remember?
Well,
ideally ones that weren't cursed.
There were. So the thing is, there are games that stand out to me for like 2 to 3 weeks after I've run them, and obviously that is helped by the fact that if we have an amazing game, I'll then go through it again, editing it and uploading it to YouTube. But I run so many games of Clock Tower a week, and particularly online, that I actually find it quite difficult to pinpoint a specific game that I ran. When I run in person, I'll often remember because it's a much more physical experience. I've probably had to go to a venue to do it. I'm not doing it from my own home, and I don't get the opportunity to run in person as often. And I remember a lot of games that I play in online because that's just one narrative from my point of view, and it's much easier for that to be memorable. But I'm often so focused on a combination of don't screw this game up, make sure you run it correctly, and also focus on talking to chat and make sure the audience understands what's going on, that I'll often find that I don't actually remember specifically what happens during a game that I've run because all of my like random access memory is being used to make sure nothing goes wrong. So I wish I could give you an answer of, oh, you know, yeah, it was this one specific game, but I actually can't remember one.
Fair enough.
Sorry, that's not the most fun answer, is it? I'll tell you the most memorable game I played it on stream, and it was the one where I was the Boom Dandy, and I took Nicky into a private chat and told him I was the Boom Dandy and that no one would believe that I actually said this to him. That was my favorite game that I played in.
I think I remember a game, Ben, that where I was the evil twin, and speaking of Nicky, and Lo was the good twin, and Nicky was the butcher, and you were the dreamer. And I think Duke was the Vortox, and you dreamt me and didn't get Evil Twin because it was the Vortox game. And you promised that you would eat your dreads if Lo and I were twins. And Lo and I were twins. How did they taste?
Well, you know, you can't prove that I didn't eat my dreads. I did accidentally have a drink my dreads at once. When I was, I fell asleep with like a glass of water next to me. Oh. And at some point in my night, my dreads must have just fallen into this glass of water. And then at some point during the night, maybe I turned over and they came out of it. But they basically had been marinating in this water for like 4 or 5 hours. And I woke up in the morning, took a big swig of it, and yeah, it didn't taste good.
Instead of games, then, are there any scripts that you found, scripts that you might want to play in your own like personal games, if you have time for your own personal games, which I don't imagine you would, but if you did?
What, World Cup scripts or just scripts in general?
World Cup scripts.
I mean, I think that, well, obviously, all 4 of them that made it through to the semi-finals are all absolutely fantastic scripts, no doubt about that. I really thought that Star Pass All Stars was going to make it further. That was a fantastic script. And I think if I had to pick one that didn't make it all the way to the semis, but is very memorable for me, it would probably be that one. Because it really was, like, I was quite surprised when it got knocked out early because I thought it was very balanced.
Yeah.
I agree.
People are talking about the Forbidden Tea in chat.
The Forbidden Tea? What does that mean?
Dreadwater.
Yeah, it's the Dreadwater.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. Right, yeah. I thought Hide and Seek was quite good as well. Didn't quite make it as far as I expected it to.
Wait, Hide and Seek or Hide and Seek?
Well, actually, they were both quite good, but Hide and Seek, I'm pretty sure it was that one that I remember thinking was when I saw that, I was like, yeah, this one's going to be making it quite far. Oh, and another one, Ramsey Street. I thought Ramsey Street was a really good script, and I was quite surprised that didn't make it further there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we lost a lot of really, really good scripts in some of those early rounds. And I also had, several cases of being like, wow, I really thought that, like, this one was going to make it further because just so many good scripts that were in the competition.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, it's entirely possible that whatever Boozling played against in round 1 is the second best script in the entire lot. And we just never got to see it go further, which again is why we're gonna have to do a group thing next time because, yeah, it's a shame to lose those.
Before we talk about Boozling, I've kind of gone through all the questions I had. So do you want to just speculate wildly about what caused the World Cup curse? Did you offend any ancient Britain spirits or any Anglo-Saxon?
Well, I did that whole week prior to that game. I did urinate on as many graves as possible. It's just what I sometimes like to do it for a week. I honestly don't know. Maybe my old apartment was built on an Indian burial ground or something. But yeah, that really was like, it's just that classic Murphy's Law, isn't it? Like the moment when you really need things to just work, they just won't.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a bit
It started
funny.
off cursed and it ended cursed. The final got moved to a completely different day.
Oh my god! Yeah, I'd almost forgotten about that. Oh, that was so. Do you know what? As well, after I called it, because like when you're in front of an audience, a large audience like that, and things are going wrong, you start to panic a little bit. You start to think, oh crap, how much longer can I put this off for? And you know that at some point you're going to either have to completely pivot or apologize and call it a day. And I should not have ended that stream then. In hindsight, I should have stuck around and just weathered it and just kind of shot the shit with chat for another 5 or 10 minutes because Stefan got everything stabilized about 10 or 15 minutes after I called it. But, at the time I just thought, this is not going well. And at some point I'm going to have to make this decision sooner or later. And so I just called it, but I do actually regret doing that. I think I should have stuck around and we would have had the final then. But hey, you just got to make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time. And sometimes it's going to be the wrong one.
Yeah, getting put on the spot is it's definitely rough sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He chose not to move it to the old tool as well.
I mean, to be honest with you, I would happily use the old tool. It's a great tool, but I didn't have it set up for streaming.
Yeah.
And as I'm sure you guys know, given that you do this yourselves, you can't just, pull a stream setup out of your arse at the last minute. It's something that, especially if you wanted to, for people to be able to see the follows and the cheers and stuff, and acknowledge all of those people with the relevant animation.
Yeah.
You can't just do all that at the spur of a moment. It takes time.
Yeah, this is why I think I'm not going to be getting rid of my brain tool setup anytime soon. Just in case, you know.
Yeah,
that was also why. So if you remember in the round before last, you had a couple of us come and host the TPI streams, and so I came on to host for Connecticut, and Habby is usually our streamer, but he is usually working on Thursdays, so he wasn't going to be able to join us. So I had to be the streamer, and I ended up having to do a bit of a janky change to our setup, and it didn't look fantastic because I hadn't realized that our moving background that we had was going to cause, like, with all of the cameras, that it was going to cause the stream to get like really, really choppy, and I had to turn off the moving background. But I wasn't set up to use the new tool with any other background or any other sort of like, setup stuff on the screen. So it ended up going from like, this looks okay to, oh, this doesn't look great, but I don't have time to fix it because we're in the process of running scripts actively on stream.
Oh man, wow, that's rough.
I tend to just use a straight screen grab of it. It works fine.
Yeah, it does have a load of streaming tools on it, to be fair.
It does,
some work better than others.
Yeah, it's very much well designed for streamers. Like, we can obviously blame Stefan for all of the technical failures of it, and he absolutely should. No, he shouldn't. Stefan's an absolutely lovely. But he's done a brilliant job with certain areas of that tool, including stream support.
Yep, he's a genius.
Absolutely. And hopefully he'll move the clear grimoire button somewhere else.
Oh my god, yes. It's so counterintuitive where it is. Every time I go, I forget where it is. And every single time I'm storytelling, I'm like, how do I clear this fucking Grim? And I have to get told, oh, it's here. And I'm like, god damn it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have to re-find it every time.
Question from Kichi. Any plans to move to try the speaking of ill-fated stream attempts, any plans to try VR again?
I really want to, but I need to make sure it's gonna function, because that was kind of embarrassing. The fact that we sat around for like 30-40 minutes dicking around and then eventually had to abandon it. That's, yeah, I don't want to be put in a position like that again. So maybe it's something that we should pre-record rather than try and do live, or at the very least we should get together and try it out and possibly pre-record it before attempting it on live stream again. My honest desire would be to do it once a month in VR. That would be awesome if we had like first Thursday of the month is VR Clock Tower. But I need to know that it's going to be stable enough to work that way first, and that's just something that I haven't had time to look into just yet. But yeah, definitely. I would love to do more VR.
Just make it the monthly character release.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
How are we going to make sure people close their eyes in an organ grinder game on VR as well?
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the winning script for 5-10 minutes. If you want to go into more detail on the script, check out Nadine and I's discussion of it a couple of weeks ago. It's highlighted, so you should be able to find it. But Ben, why do you think that people picked this script? What's out of all of the 64 scripts that were entered into the competition, why did Boozling win?
Well, it's a combination of the fact that it's a very good, very well written script, and every time we played it, the game ended up being really, really good. I'm sure there are like several scripts that had the potential to win, but just their game that week just was a bit of a damp squib or whatever. Boozling never had one of those. I think it's also quite obvious that Lowe had been working on this for a very long time, because they stopped making sort of major changes a couple of rounds back, and it was pretty obvious that they'd got their script worked out. So it wasn't being heavily developed right until the end, which is always good. It also has a little bit of everything. It's got some drunkenness and poisoning, obviously. It's got the right amount of outsider manipulation. It's got 3 very solid demons that are all similar enough that they can easily hide. It's got some madness in there. It's got a lot of information, but the information rolls that it has are the ones where you have to kind of work at them. So, fisherman, cannibal, mathematician, savant, these are all info rolls that in the right hands can be really powerful and really entertaining, but also require the player to actually, get involved. They can't just sit there and have the info come to them. I think that combination of things just make it was always going to do well, and it doesn't surprise me at all that it won.
The mathematician was the one character that we felt was the real bit of an odd one out, considering it feels a bit vestigial, a bit of a nod to old scripts, old versions of the script, considering the only thing that, strictly speaking, it tracks 2 things, but the only thing that it really tracks is the Vigor Mortis.
Yeah? Vigor, do you mean Nodashi?
There is no Nodashi on it anymore.
Hang on a sec, have I got an older iteration of it up here?
Oh, stuff. What version number have you got?
We're looking at version 7.
I've got version 7 here that's got a Fangu Imp Nodashi.
I've got Fangu Imp Vigor Mortis on version 7.
The hell? This is weird.
That's weird. Hang on, I'm gonna go to check Jeff's site and see which one is the most recent uploaded.
Well, I think it's the one that I have, because I recently uploaded it because it's going on YouTube.
Okay, well, God knows where we found this version then.
Okay, hang on a sec. Let me have a look.
Ours clearly says B7 at the top. Yeah, I'm looking at the Boozling currently. It has version, even though it says it's version 8, it says on the PDF V7.
Yeah, that's the one that I uploaded.
Nodashi.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me upload it unless I put 8. But it looks like Vigor Mortis hasn't been on this script since round 2 of the World Cup.
Okay, well, fuck us then, I guess. Everything we said about it.
But your point about the mathematician it still stands, because previously it was only detecting Vigor Mortis. Now it's only detecting really Nodashi.
Yeah, but that's at least something.
Yeah,
it's going to detect more than that. Well, that's good to know. So the script that you can see, chat, is wrong. Vigor Mortis should be Nodashi. I wonder if there are any other discrepancies. Hopefully not. But yeah, the mathematician isn't really doing a whole lot. But apart from that, it's definitely a really well put together script, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's one that it's fun to watch it being run, because there's quite a lot of storyteller decision making on there. And that we've got to consider that as well, because ultimately these guys were watching it, or the audience were watching it from an all-knowing perspective. Whereas I imagine some scripts are actually perhaps a bit of a ball ache to run, but are extremely entertaining for the players.
Yeah. Do you think that there was scripts that were better to watch than necessarily run or play were favored by the format at all? Or do you think that... I don't know if you know what I mean. Like, if there's something that's like great capital C content might do better over something that's necessarily more fun.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think as well, it depends on the players, right? Some players are really entertaining to watch because they're incredibly smart and they do incredible plays. Other players are entertaining to watch because they're like really silly and do, very brave, some might argue dumb, big plays that are very rarely work out, but are never boring. And I think that's something we've got to consider, because when those guys were going, when the audience were going to those pages to vote, it says which one do you think is the most promising, or which one do you think deserves to go into the next round. But in actuality, what were all of these voters thinking that? Were they all being objective and thinking, hey, well, that thing Nikki did was hilarious and my favorite moment on the stream, but actually I think the other script is objectively better? I very much doubt that even half of the people who voted were actually thinking that way, because you can't not have your opinion influenced by how entertaining it was, right? And some might argue that it being entertaining for an audience is what makes it a good script. How do you even define what is good and what is bad? So there are so many factors at play, and this is why I encourage people to enjoy the World Cup, but don't treat it like an actual sports World Cup, because it's impossible to have a fair contest with this. There are so many variables.
Yeah, I think that a game just being an unfortunate game definitely, particularly in the early rounds, eliminated some really good scripts. But that's what we were talking about earlier, right? With potential format change.
I mean, I had people message me during the World Cup and say, people are not happy about this, and this. It's made the World Cup unfair. It's made it unbalanced. And I said to most of them, it's in the rules pack. It's like the first thing it said in the rules pack for the World Cup was, this is not going to be a fair contest. It's impossible. But here are the things that we're going to do to try and make it as fair as we possibly can. But actually, some of those things that we did to make it fair might, for all I know, it might have actually made it less fair. I mean, if we're randomizing characters, to me, that seems like the only fair way to do it. But in truth, some scripts are good because they rely on an intelligent storyteller making good choices about what tokens are in the bag.
I don't know. Yeah. I kind of like the randomizing aspect to it. Like, don't get me wrong. I think that there are valid criticisms to be had for it, but I think as a method, it has some pros to it as well. Like, for one thing, you as a storyteller, or as a script writer, when you write the script, sort of like what you're going for. You have an eye on those interactions that you were looking at, that you were like, okay, these are some things that I need to be conscious of when I am making the choices to put them in. And these are things that are like, cool to just do whatever with. And you can't necessarily expect any storyteller who might come upon your script and be like, oh, this is cool, let's run this, to be as cognizant necessarily as some of the things that you are like, well, when I'm storytelling this, I'm going to keep an eye on these things. Can some of the storytellers who pick up scripts to do that? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a skill that great storytellers build up over time, is they can pick up any script, look at it, and be like, okay, these are some interactions that maybe are a little bit less great. So like, let's just be super aware of what we're putting in. But when what you're looking to build is a robust script, I think that one of the tools that you as a script writer have is actually randomizing your setups and seeing what happens with that. You don't have to fully run games with that necessarily. Like, what I do a lot of times is I'll put my script in the tool, I'll hit a shuffle, and I'll just deal the tokens out, and I'll see what I'm noticing about this completely randomized setup, right? And I see like, okay, am I struggling as a storyteller with some of these things here? What do I think, just looking at this, the odds are that either team could potentially win off of this random setup, which you can't fully predict, but you can get some kind of idea of like at least where the game is going to start. So when you're doing a robust script testing, which is I think what part of the World Cup was trying to accomplish, getting some amount of randomization in there kind of helps you see where your flaws are better, so that you can actually improve your script more. If you never stress test anything, you aren't going to know what the limits are, and you aren't going to know where those weak points are quite as well, right? So I think the randomization has some pretty positive aspects to it that is tempered by the fact that you were allowed to make some changes. We had that limit of like 5 changes in a game And I think that was actually really nicely balanced against each other. You get some amount of randomization and some amount of like careful, thoughtful storyteller choices that could try to set this up to have, you know, its best chance, while still also pushing at some of those edges to find what are the strengths and weaknesses and where can we shore those up.
I think I agree with that final point in particular. I think any script not called Trouble Brewing, if you just completely draw at random, you're gonna risk that being an unbalanced setup, even with the other base scripts. But at the same time, if you with a good script, you can definitely get to a great game with maybe 2 or 3 changes from a random setup. I think you need to be able to have interesting games with that storyteller feedback, with an intelligent storyteller making choices. But at the same time, you need to have more than a few things that a script can do. And I also agree that I think that 5 changes made for a really good balance between those 2 extremes.
Yeah, I mean, with most non-TB scripts, you just can't randomly decide, right? Because if something alters the setup, then you're going to have to wade in there and make, unless you're going to just repeatedly draw randomly until you get something that's legal, you kind of have to. How would you two feel about a new rule for the next one where you can make up to 4 or 5 changes, but you must stick with the demon that you got?
You know, I'd be all right with that, because like I really think that obviously anything on the script it doesn't exist in a vacuum. No individual character exists by itself on a script. Everything is in relation to what else is there. But the demons often have some of the biggest influence on the game, right? Because a lot of games, when you have multiple demons, it's sort of a big part of the solve is what demon do we have in play? Like, what type of demon do we have in play? Because we have different demon candidates for different demon types. And so we want to try to solve which one it is. So I think of the roles on a script, the demon type that's in play can be one of the biggest deciding factors about what else you do with your roles. And maybe that's part of why Trouble Brewing stands up to that randomization so much, because there's one demon, and so the entire script is very in tune with specifically that demon, and everything is meant to kind of, you know, counter or assist that one demon. So I think that what demon type is in play can have a pretty big impact on the game. And I personally, like, I'd be all right with that as a rule, to just, you know, you have to stick with what demon that you're given so that you get the best opportunity to see what that demon does to the script.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's generally how most of the games got run anyway. Certainly how I tend to do it, even not for the World Cup. When I'm running a game, I almost always just randomize and then decide which demon has the tool given me, or which demon has me literally physically shuffling the tokens in person and picking one at random. What's that given me, and build from there. So yeah, I would. I mean, I run it that way anyway, so I support that. And I think the chat also broadly agree with that. Ryback, sorry, it was Mullabok and Emma both also agree with that as well. So yeah, I definitely support that. Yeah, so that was the World Cup, and that was Low Script Boozling, which won the competition. What are you planning on doing? I know there was talk of a trophy. What's the plan for Low going forward?
Do you know what? I've actually forgotten what it is. We promise I'll have to look it up. But there is definitely a trophy coming Low's way, and I would quite like to memorialize this in some way, either by having like an official bit of art created for it, you know, edition art similar to what TB and SMV has. And I've been discussing with Ed
really cool.
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? I've been discussing with Ed about the possibility of having it on the wiki as well. With the idea being that, you know, 10, 20 years from now, we've got all of the World Cup winners, including all of the various iterations of their scripts, memorialized for everyone to see, not just for the sake of record keeping and convenience, but also to show anybody who goes on there what script building is all about and how scripts progress over time when they're tested.
I really like that idea.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Particularly with the custom script thing, you could definitely send Lowe's way. I'm sure they'd love that. Yeah. So, do you have? I guess my final question is on this subject is whether or not you have a timetable for trying again next year's 2024. So, will that be the year that we start the Euros? Will we have this again, but only European people are allowed to compete?
Well, that does seem like the reasonable thing to do, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know, honestly. I need some time to sort of decompress from it and think about it. I've also got to take into account now the fact that we're releasing a character every month. So if we do a World Cup, do we stop doing that for a couple of months while we do a World Cup, or do we keep going with that and have new characters being released during the iterations for it, or do we simply say, hey, here's the cutoff point, you can't use any characters that came out after the start of the World Cup? There's a lot of things that need to be thought about, and just figuring out how it will fit into our schedule. There's a lot more Clock Tower streamers now as well, and deciding which ones do and don't get to host games will be require a lot of thought and how we're going to do that fairly. And there's just so many factors involved that I just don't know. But what I do know is I would like to do it again, and if I do it again, or if we do it again, it will be much quicker. It will take less time to do, and it will hopefully be a lot more focused on a smaller number of scripts.
I imagine you learned a lot about what it takes to actually organize this level of thing. A lot of times you don't have a really solid idea until you go do a thing, and then you're like, wow, okay, here's a bunch of stuff that I hadn't anticipated or ever thought about, but now you know for next time.
Yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare at times, and after the first round, emailing 32 people and trying to get them to hand in an iteration of a script was just that's never going to work. So, especially considering it took ages to get through those first 32 games, I think next time we want to smash it all out in a month if possible, and just have a very intense, very quick contest.
I think round one itself took a solid month to get all of those first games done.
I think it was more than that. I think it was 2.5 months.
Actually, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
With a single elimination script competition, the first round is going to be half of the games. By definition. Every time you add an extra round to it, you double the number of games.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the way these kind of tournaments are actually run in sports, they'll be having 2 games a day for the first round, and that first round of games is done in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we have a few days off, and then it's time for the next round and into the knockouts. So I think I'd have to ideally get a coalition of lots of streamers, as many streamers as I can reasonably find who are obviously, competent storytellers as well. And just politely say to them, hey, listen, we're gonna have to some degree dictate when you do your games.
Yeah. People can always say no, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I suppose if everyone gives me their availability, it'll only be like being a duty manager in a supermarket, really.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the World Cup, a very exciting time, very exciting number competition, and looking forward to the next one. You did mention in there that that you're going to be releasing a character a month. So let's segue into talking about the Organ Grinder with Caffeine Boost's second question. If you gave an infinite number of typewriters to an infinite number of organ grinders, would you eventually get the perfect script?
No, because organ grinders can only perform music. They're actually illiterate.
Sure.
Molly's answer was yes, but no one would see it.
Talk to us about the Organ Grinder and what it was that made you and the rest of TPI decide this is the character that's coming out first. This is the one that we're using to show off the Stiff-On tool.
So yeah, we basically it came from a number of desires. The first one was we're not giving. A lot of people have very kindly supported us on Patreon while we develop this app and while we tinker and mess around with it. But in actuality, they're really doing us a favor because we didn't feel like we were giving a great amount of value for money at the beginning. It was mostly just, if you're an ultra fan and you really believe in us, you can get in on this now. But it was important to me that we started making our Patreon supporters feel like they were getting some bang for their buck. So the most obvious, I guess, property that we have is our intellectual property, which is new characters. And so a character a month for a monthly subscription Patreon seems like a pretty fair exchange. We also were acutely aware that there's many arguments to be made for why the official app is better than the old free Brain tool, but it's still not objectively better. It might have like built-in communication and webcams and stuff like that, but there are still things that you can do even now with the old tool that you can't do with the official app. We've yet to put homebrew support in, for example, and most importantly, you can play the old one for free, which makes it a lot better to a lot of people. So it was important for us that the character was one that showed off the necessity for a tool that has continued development, continued programming and patching. So there was a handful of characters that are unreleased that we knew just simply wouldn't work unless we put in special functionality for it. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for us to pick one of those. And lastly, we wanted it to be a real game changer because, we'd not released characters for a long time. We wanted to start off with a bang. And the Organ Grinder definitely does change the way people play quite heavily.
For sure. It's I think it's probably my favorite release minion. We did get a question about it as well from Dan, which is the Organ Grinder is the first new character we've got in a little bit. It absolutely stands on its own with a unique new mechanic that does some pretty big impacts on gameplay. It's also probably the loudest minion we've seen so far. As a player who really enjoys persistent, cohesive worlds that are created by character interactions in the core 3 scripts, I'd love to know what kind of conversations go into the impact of releasing these new characters independent of their home script.
So yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So there's a number of things that we've been considering. First of all, we don't want to release too many characters from the same yet to be released script. So when we release a new physical script, we want it to come with a dump of at least half a dozen characters, hopefully quite a bit more than that. So we're picking between Midnight in the House of the Damned and The Tomb and all these scripts that are still in development. We don't want to take like all but 2 or 3 characters from one of those scripts and send them out there into the public. And then when we actually release that script, people are like, well, we've already seen more or less all of these, so this isn't that exciting. So that's kind of factored into our decision-making somewhat. We're also looking at, as we release characters over the course of the next coming months, it's important to us that we have a nice mixture of these crazy, exciting, wow characters like the Organ Grinder. But we also want some, you start knowing a few things characters, and we want some, this one changes the setup characters, and we want some outsiders that are going to shake up the way the meta runs, and we want them to be a nice spread. At one point when we were discussing how to do this, we talked about releasing a Teensyville over the course of a year. So one demon, 2 minions, 2 outsiders, and is it like 5 or 6 townsfolk? Yeah, because that comes to 11. So initially I was like, hey, why don't we release a character for 11 months? And then in the 12th month, we'll then have the World Cup. So these are all things that we considered, but we decided against doing that because we kind of wanted the freedom to, do what we want, to be honest with you, with the characters. But yeah, it's important to us that we have a nice mixture of characters. They're not all just crazy minions that shake things up, because we're acutely aware that a lot of people out there are going to take these characters and build scripts with them. And some people are going to be a little less responsible with script building than others, and it makes life much harder for the mods on places like the Unofficial when we release a massive spate of very complicated and difficult to run characters.
Ogg Rider, I think, is fine because there's not really a whole lot that breaks with it. Like, there are things that aren't fun with it, but there's not much that's like harmful, I guess.
Yeah.
One question one thing that I've seen from a few people that I would like to put to you, bit of a hardball question for you, Ben.
Cool.
That's all right.
Okay.
How do you feel about concerns that releasing this characters in this way to one section of the community is splitting that community?
I mean, that's a good question, and one that I'm glad someone has asked. It's a difficult one, this, because at least from my perspective, the thing that I care most about with Blood on the Clocktower is maintaining people's interest and excitement in it. Obviously, I want everyone to be as happy as possible, but I also don't want the game to die. And I've been around this industry long enough to see how you kill a game through inactivity. And it's very easy to release characters digitally compared to releasing them physically. Releasing them physically is a long process that requires a lot of messing around on Photoshop and discussing things with a factory person in China and getting shipping sorted out and dealing with freighting and distribution partners and stuff like that. So I imagine most people listening to this now will appreciate that it goes without saying, really, that digital releasing something is a lot easier than physically releasing something. It also, and I don't think a lot of people take this into consideration, but it's one of the major factors. The character doesn't have to be complete if we release it online. We can at any moment change the wording of a character, and it will change on all the script tool and everything across the board. So if we want to update a character, and we are going to update some of them, we can actually test that out digitally first, and then once it's ready, once it's been in the oven long enough, we can release it as part of a physical pack. Whereas obviously, if you've bought something and it's got this text on it, we can't change that text anymore. So there is a kind of there's an attitude where we feel like it's okay to release things digitally as long as they're not only available digitally for a very long time. And I think I understand and appreciate the frustration from some people that digital players are going to get things before physical players. But the truth is, that's only if your idea of playing something physically includes you must have the token, the high quality token made by us. I go to my local print shop when I want to print out homebrew character ideas that I've made, and I just pay them to print a thing on high quality card, and then I buy some felt backed stuff that's got like a sticky thing on it, and I just make my own tokens. And board gamers have been doing this kind of thing for much, much longer than you or I have been around. And if you want to go and make your own Blood on the Clocktower tokens, you absolutely can. So yeah, if you want this stuff, go and get it right now. If you still buy it from us when it comes out officially, great. But no hard feelings if you don't, as far as I'm concerned, because you're the adjudicator of how you run your games at the end of the day. It's a complicated question. I'm not sure if I've done a good job of answering that, but I think it kind of covers most of the points.
I'm also asking kind of in the context of online play, with releasing a character that only works if you have software that costs the amount that it will cost to buy a copy of Blood on the Clocktower once a year.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you an interesting statistic. A little less than 90% of the accounts that are playing with the Blood on the Clocktower official app are paid accounts right now. So only 1 in every 10 people who are using that app regularly are actually paying us for it. And I think that's a statistic that tells a lot, really. If you have a group of mates who you regularly play with, let's say that there's one storyteller and 9 players, it's costing you $1 a month, and that money is basically keeping the lights on, really. Things like an app like this require a lot of upkeep, not just server rentals and stuff like that, because streaming video and audio is quite server intensive, but also paying a programmer to continue developing on the app, and also, if you want, there are ways that you can run the organ grinder on the free tool if you really want to. You can have, I mean, obviously it's a workaround, but you can use Discord and private voting that way. But at the end of the day, we can't keep giving our stuff away for free forever. At some point, we have to try and at least make enough money to keep us all in house and home. And I think that the vast majority of people will probably reasonably understand that at some point we have to at least give our audience the option to give us some money if they want to.
I think so. Something I do want to say to this, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not going to get too deep into them because I'll end up going off on like a ranty tangent, and I don't want to do that. But one of the thoughts that I have is that there is going to be a group of people that you are not able to convert onto the new tool. And it's not because these are people who don't want to support this wonderful game. It's because they literally just aren't able to afford it. And like, certainly, people who fall into that category, like, understand that, of course, you guys are like you said, trying to keep the lights on and pay for, all of the hard work that Brain is putting into this continuous development. And that's a good thing. People should get paid for their work. But at the same time, I feel like it wouldn't be too much of a concession to just put the artwork on the tool, the older tool, nobody who uses the old tool is ever really asking for that level of functionality that is coming from the official app, right? Like, I don't think anybody running the old tool is going to sit there and demand, like, hey, not only do we want Organ Grinder on here, we also want secret votes. No, when we're running with that app, we're all coming with the understanding that, like, we're going to have to do kind of a lot of things through Discord, and characters that work really, really differently and warp some of the gameplay aspects are going to be a part of that. But like, I feel like you could split the community slightly less if you just at least allowed the token art on there. Yes, you can absolutely like basically homebrew it in, right? You write your own character. I've actually already done that, and I have provided resources for people who don't have access to the new tool and feasibly don't see themselves. So you can DM me or find that somewhere on Unofficial if you're interested in it. But like, if you could just let some of those players not have to do that every single time a character could be released, I feel like that could do a lot to ease some of the gaps in the community that might get made. But at the same time, I think also that would help long term, because not everybody is going to be in a situation for, the rest of their clock tower life of like, well, I can't afford this. They might not be able to afford this right now, but in the future, they would. And the more supported and seen that they might feel, or, from back when they couldn't afford it, I think the more loyalty that inspires. So I think like a long-term strategy, that's something to at least think about.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, to be honest with you, because I've always been an advocate for free-to-play models. And it's something that we've considered quite heavily and may well get implemented down the line, is moving the official app from a subscription model to a free-to-play model, where certain, cosmetic things are unlocked if you subscribe. You might get like a cool border around your webcam feed and a little fun little label for your name and stuff like that, and maybe some cool little token art or special token art for people who sub and things like that. So it's something that we've considered, just bringing everybody onto the official app. But I'm a little I'm not quite sure what you're referring to with allowing the token art onto the old app. Can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so like right now, if you want to have a token that shows art for the organ grinder on the old app, you don't have an already built into the program like token to do that for you. You would have to actually edit your JSON to write the organ grinder as if it were a custom character, which to be fair is not a lot of work, but it is a skill that not everybody necessarily has or knows how to do inherently. Whereas like, you know, if you just put the token art on there so that people can just have any of their regular JSONs that they've made from the script tool just work and have an icon and an ability shown for the organ grinder. Like it basically just the bare minimum of here's the token that you can use if you want actual functionality for it. That's available on the official app.
How would we go about doing that?
The same way that any other character got added. I mean, I don't know how Farina programmed it, but
correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain we don't own. In fact, I'm pretty certain the Brain tool is open source. And
yeah, so what you can do as well, if you have the skills or you have somebody who knows how to do it, is you can actually fork off the program and like host it yourself, and then you can, because it's open source, you have all of the coding, and therefore you would be able to add in anything into the program itself. It would mean that you are using a different URL though. Like it would necessitate a completely different website basically. And you could do that. But what I'm saying is like if clocktower.online just had a token available for players to use that they didn't have to homebrew it in.
Isn't clocktower.online something that's owned specifically by Brain?
Yeah, so like basically it would be Brain just putting the token art in.
Well, then yeah, you're going to have to appeal to Brain about that because he's a private citizen. I don't think he's owned by TPI. I don't think we have any say in whether or not. I mean, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty certain that we don't have any say in what happens on that private person's website. And if you want that to happen, then yeah, go ask Brain. I mean, you have my support as a fan of the game. You have my backing to go and ask Brain to do that.
Well, we are making our way through TPI, so maybe we will do that at some point.
Yeah, get him on here. I'm sure.
Like my current understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but my current understanding was that the old tool that Brain had was not going to be updated for any kind of like new characters and stuff, and I thought that had something to do with TPI asking him not to do that, but maybe I'm just wrong and, you know, got mixed signal somewhere or something.
Yeah, I'd be very, very shocked to learn that were the case. I think it's quite simply that Brain doesn't want to develop two almost identical apps simultaneously. I would imagine. I don't actually know. You know, I can't really speak for what his opinion is, but I would imagine that it's just simply that he only wants to develop one Clocktower app at the moment, and it's the one that he's getting paid to make. But you guys, if you or anybody wants to go, if you know any programmers at all who want to go and take that code and keep updating it and host it somewhere, but by all means, like, I'm well up for that. I've been a PC gamer long enough to know that when you try and force people to pay for things with like shady tactics, all it does is make people less inclined to buy your thing and force all of the piracy or whatever underground, and it never ever ends well for any computer game company ever. So I'm fully in support of having a free and open source old Brain tool for the rest of eternity, as far as I'm concerned.
So that was your hardball question for the day. I don't want to move too far away from that discussion because I do think it's a very important discussion to have, and I know that I think you and I have spoken about it in the past, and I know I have as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. Question from somebody, I've lost it. I'll find out who asked the question, but the question is, would you consider releasing in the future just like a bunch of blank physical tokens, just completely blank for people to make it easier for people to run their own homebrew characters or scripts.
This is something that we have actually discussed, and it was a discussion that we had before the game launched because we knew that we would have a bunch of blank tokens on the punch board. We knew that we had like X number of tokens, and the number of tokens that we could physically fit on all the punch boards was like X plus 4 or 5 or something. And so we discussed at the time, shall we just leave those blank so people can make up their own characters? Or, you know, if they lost one and wanted to replace it, they could just draw one in. And there was quite a bit of debate internally about it, because one of the things that we agonize over at TPI is people's first games of Blood on the Clocktower. We all live in a constant fear and paranoia, because we know somewhere in the world, and you guys know, somewhere in the world right now, somebody's first experience of Blood on the Clocktower is someone's janky homebrew where all of the demons are fascist dictators and all of the good guys are like hockey players or something. And that's just a terrible, terrible way to be introduced to Blood on the Clocktower. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't facilitate people homebrewing. In fact, I'm of the opinion that homebrew is what will keep the game going long past the point of time in which it would normally have slipped away from the public consciousness, because the game never stops getting new expansions if you've got a bunch of smart homebrew creators in the community. So yeah, I think that there is very good scope for us releasing tokens, but I think more importantly, everybody who's listening to this, be fully aware you don't need to buy blank tokens from us, because if you buy blank tokens from us, you've either got to stick things on them, which will inevitably get worn off over time, or you've got to draw tokens by hand, which I suppose some people will have fun doing, but the vast majority of us won't. I make my own tokens all the time. You can get felt-backed sticky card, and you can go to your local print shop and have them print high-quality card. And I just stick the felt card on the back and cut around it, and I've got not only every single unreleased character token right here, right now. You can hear me jangling them about, but I've also got I've got my own Red Dwarf homebrew script that I've made, fully printed out and ready to go for whatever unsuspecting victims agree to playtest it with me. So yeah, maybe we will sell blank tokens someday. But to be honest, you can get a much cheaper and much better job by just doing it yourself.
Yeah. Other question was from Frigimon Fanatic, who asks also probably more a question for Stefan, but I'll ask it to you since you're here. How the Stefan Tools mobile support is coming along. Where's that in the priority queue?
It's on the priorities, but not in the next sort of 10 to 11 months, that's for sure. Because right now, in this early stage of development, the priorities are stability, for it to not be janky and crashing all the time, updating it to have all of the things needed to run all of the more esoteric characters. So, like recently it got support for having a Lil Monster vote in the night phase, and a while back it got, spy bit seeing the Grimoire support and things like that. So those things are all higher on the priority list than mobile capability. But it is something that we are definitely going to do, because we do want this web app to be something that an in-person storyteller in real life can use. If for some reason they don't want to use their own grimoire, they can use a tablet or a phone to keep track of the game. But yeah, as much as I would love for that to be up the priority list, we have to make sure the app works first before we start even thinking about making it work on mobile phones and the like.
That's fair enough. To go back to the Organ Grinder, you have an Organ Grinder script competition lined up, of course, that people can enter on the unofficial. What advice would you give to people? What do you think works really well with Organ Grinder? What doesn't work well with Organ Grinder? What do you see as Organ Grinder? And I guess more generally, what do you see as Organ Grinder's role in on a script and in a game?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually, because I've run a fair bit of Organ Grinder, but not on a great number of different scripts. So I think if we take a look at the anatomy of Organ Grinder, ultimately it's this one specific mechanic, which in this case is voting, has been changed significantly. So I think that a good Organ Grinder script will either lean into voting related things, or the opposite side of the spectrum, have a bunch of characters that don't interact with voting a great deal. So for example, the Golem, I think, is a great outsider to have on an Organ Grinder script, because it surpasses, not surpasses, that's the word I'm looking for. It ignores the voting bit, right? So all of a sudden, you've got this character that actually removes this mechanic that is being messed with, and then the Golem gains a new dynamic to it. The Golem can kill the Organ Grinder if it nominates them. So it's either lean on that in that direction where we completely ignore, or go with like your Flower Girl and all those kind of things that actually themselves get a new sort of dynamic to their ability on an Organ Grinder script. I mean, what do you guys think? The Flower Girl is like nerfed or buffed by the Organ Grinder?
I think that the Flower Girl Organ Grinder jinx is better than a hard jinx between the two, but I wouldn't want to be a Flower Girl in an Organ Grinder game, at least not at the moment. At least not with how people are playing with Organ Grinder.
You see, yeah. I'm the polar opposite of that. I would love it.
I think that it kind of depends on what your group is doing to combat the Organ Grinder, right? So if you have a group that starts talking about their votes, their intentions for voting before they do it, who they claim to have voted on the previous day, it makes the Flower Girl Organ Grinder much more functional, because you have an actual piece of information where you can try to start tracking down where what people are saying is maybe not quite adding up, right? But if you have a group that shies away from that and feels like, talking about voting, and it feels taboo because it kind of feels like it can be in the area of trying to force people to do a certain thing. I don't think that it has to cross over into that. But I think that a lot of people feel like it's starting to get to that territory. And so right now, anyway, they're starting to kind of not, they don't feel comfortable with it. But when you find a group that feels more comfortable doing that and just openly talking about voting and vote coordination, I think that the Flower Girl jinx actually can work out pretty okay.
Yeah, that seems like a fair assessment. I mean, I think it's also important to note that what's fun for the players and fun for the storyteller don't necessarily line up either, do they, really? I mean, a lot of storytellers out there I've seen will do crazy things because they're intrigued and they want to see what the outcome of those crazy things are. And that can be fun, but it's not, it's unfun as often as it is fun, especially if you take it a little too far.
I know that a couple of the other big topics of discussion recently have been, first of all, Alchemist with the Organ Grinder. Is that fun? Is that interesting? Is that beneficial to town?
There's some strong opinions on that one.
There are some very strong opinions on that one. And there are just as strong opinions on the second one, which is conditional game end characters like Goblin, Fearmonger, and Saint, the Organ Grinder. How do you feel about those?
Well, I mean, like I said a second ago, if you're going to build a script with the Organ Grinder on it, either lean into that or lean away from that. And I think whether or not they make a good combination depends entirely on what your group likes. This question can be applied to pretty much any game. Ben, if you're going to run a D&D campaign, do you think you should run one that's all about political intrigue with lots of conversations and characters and skill checks and puzzles? Or do you want to run Tomb of Horrors, a meat grinder where all the players are supposed to die? That depends on what your group like, really, doesn't it? Some groups, you'll be very lucky to learn that they will enjoy either because they're just there to sit and socialize and are happy to roll some dice and play some games. But yeah, certainly, I think there's like a hardcore of Clock Tower fans who have a very strong idea about what they do and don't want or do and don't enjoy, especially the guys who are all about the mechanics and a lot less about the socials. Those guys seem to have a very strong idea of what should and shouldn't be done on a script. And if you're running a game for a bunch of those guys, don't put an alchemist to the saint on an organ grinder script with a goblin, because they're not going to have a good time. But I don't really have strong opinions either way, because honestly, I'm just happy to play games with people, and as much as it might sound like a bit of a cop-out answer, but as long as everyone else is having fun, I will usually have fun too. And I don't mind really if the game ends early, as long as everyone's having a good time.
I don't think anything in Clock Tower should ever be compared to Tomb of Horrors.
well, there is this one script. What's it called? Storyteller's Nightmare?
I've written a sequel to that one. I'll tell you about it later.
Hoisted upon your own petard there, Alejo.
Yeah, but that was horrible for the storyteller. Whereas Tomb of Horrors is horrible for the players. What do you think about the organ grinder in general as a character? Like, what do you think is some? Like, is it one of where would it rank in your minion rankings? Let's say.
God, that's a difficult question to answer, because I think that the organ grinder. So when I'm building scripts, there are two things that I think about. Is this character useful in terms of the build of this script? Is this character something that will be fun with the other characters on the script? So useful characters are characters like the balloonist, because it provides +1 outsider, or the devil's advocate, because it can simulate other characters that protect from execution, or the grandmother, because it's some solid you start knowing info, it gives people a reason to talk, and also it can cause an extra death in the night, which can cover up a Shabaloth or whatever. So there are those kinds of characters, right? And I'm sure you two are nodding along here. You've built enough scripts to know that there are just some staple characters that are always going to be useful in certain situations on a script. The organ grinder is not one of those characters. It's not a useful character for script building. So then I guess you have to ask yourself, well, is it something that you're going to be able to put on a lot of scripts? I think the answer to that is no. It's like the heretic or the atheist, where you really, if you're going to put that on a script, the script needs to be built around its existence. Every decision you make to put another character on that script needs to consider this character and how it will interact with it. So yeah, in terms of ranking, I don't really. Sorry, this is another cop-out answer, Alejo, but I don't really think I can rank it somewhere, because it's there's too many factors. If you're asking whether or not I personally enjoy the character, yes, I do. It's up there. It's one of my favorites, but it's not my favorite minion. That one's not been released yet, but when it is, oh boy, it's gonna be a good day.
Oh dear. All right, we can go back to the really hard questions then, if you prefer to answer those. If you're better at that,
hit me. Let's
go. When is TPI's OGL 1.2 coming out?
OGL 1.2. Do we have an OGL?
You don't. No, you don't.
I was going to say, that one slipped past me. It would be cool though, wouldn't it? If we had an OGL, I quite like that. I'm a fan of OGLs. I've always been a very big believer in giving your community the tools to basically keep your game interesting. And when Wizards of the Coast tried to pull that crap with the OGL, I don't know what they were thinking. Like, that was definitely a decision that was not made by the people who make content for D&D.
Right. Yeah. That's Hasbro all over, isn't it?
Yeah, they just want to make all the money instead of most of the money, which I suppose a bunch of suits in an office will think is good, but that's because they're not, actually real humans.
So how will you feel about it when Hasbro inevitably buys TPI?
I'm looking forward to it, because I'll be able to say that I was a former senior member of a team that was owned by Hasbro, and then I'll immediately quit and go and find another job with that excellent CV and reference.
We have a question, which is that Emma wants to know what your favorite outsider is and why it's Butler.
Well, I do like being the butler a lot, but I mainly like being the butler because it's an opportunity for me to show people someone having fun as the butler. But I've got on record a number of times before saying that I like characters that don't have a great amount of responsibility for winning or losing the game. So my job becomes to talk to people and suss them out and see if I think people are lying to me and help players that have got like an amnesiac or something like that, who needs help figuring things out. That's my favorite role to play on both teams. But I think I would have to say that my favorite outsider is probably the puzzle master, because it's so much fun. It's so much fun. To play the puzzle master, you have to go and talk to people, and you have to ask yourself the question: is this person really getting bad info, or are they just bullshitting me? And that, for me, is like the essence of Clock Tower. That's what I love about it. The fact that it's a social, dynamic experience. And I love being the puzzle master, and I have successfully nailed the demon twice as the puzzle master now. So I don't mind saying that I'm actually pretty good at it.
Nice. How much work is it to release a Clock Tower character? How much work has gone into the release of the Organ Grinder? How far ahead are you with the character releases?
I'll answer that last question first. We have nailed down the next 2 character releases over the next 2 months, and we're hoping to stay kind of that far ahead. Just in case someone gets, I don't know, run over by a bus or something, and we have to scramble to get things together. We won't have to worry about this for at least a couple of months. We can let it slide. A lot of work goes into it. Excuse me. A lot of work goes into it. Obviously, this one needed quite a bit of integration with the app, so there's that. Stefan had a lot to do, and that in and of itself requires a lot of testing. So we've got everyone saw it on stream. We have a staging server, which is a version of the app that has all of the features that we're currently testing for release. And I'm personally spending quite a bit of time in there just making sure things work. We had to write an almanac entry for the character. One of the things that we have agreed internally is that we will not release a character that does not have an almanac entry, because we need to, particularly for characters like the Organ Grinder that have a lot of weird interactions, and that there's a very high chance that storytellers will screw up running it. We wanted to make sure we had that objective document where we could say, this is how it works. Here's some examples of it in play. This is how you're supposed to run it. Then there's obviously things like art and various visual things that need doing for it. And Jinxes takes a lot of time. Ed sits there with the he sat there with the Organ Grinder and compared it to every single Blood on the Clock Tower character that is in existence, and identified as many Jinxes as there were, and then went through them with a bunch of volunteers and Steve to try and figure out sensible Jinxes for all of them. I would say we've been working on this release for about 3 months.
But let's not pretend as if Ed didn't really, really enjoy that process. Come on now.
Oh yeah, he definitely.
I will say I had an inkling that the Organ Grinder was going to be the first character released. It was kind of an obvious choice. So a couple of months back, I sent Ed just a massive document out of all of the interactions that I spotted with all of the released characters.
Well, there you go, Alejo. Even you've been working hard on the Organ Grinder release.
I also did that for fun. It turns out that Ed had already done that 5 months ago, so it was entirely pointless. But it was a thing that I did for no reason. But it was fun. It is fun in a weird way. It must also have been tricky, of course, with him being on parental leave.
Yeah, although to be fair, it's in some senses it's been quite well for him. It's been quite handy because he's obviously waking up. He's on maternity leave, it will be paternity leave for him, and he's he's getting woken up at 3 a.m. and he has to cuddle a baby for 45 minutes. And as much as I'm sure that's enjoyable for him, it probably isn't that stimulating after he's stared into little baby's eyes for a few minutes. So he's going through Jinxes and playing around with the script tool and doing various little bits of things that need to be done and that he can kill some time doing them. So he's managing it pretty well. He certainly seems to still be sane every time I speak to him.
He seems to be doing all right. I had a couple of questions. The most recent one was from Bambi, who asks how the in fewer words or in more words, how the translations are going.
Translations is something that we were all ready to rock and roll with, and we had some of you might know Vidi, Real Vidi. Some of you might be familiar with them because they did a lot of. I believe they were the creator of Nara.
Yeah,
I want to say but more importantly, Real Vidi did it was an incredible asset to the whole of this community because they translated the game into various languages that they knew, and then got volunteers to help them to translate it into other languages. And it's really they are the ones who are responsible for this becoming so big in Asia, particularly China, because they did the legwork to make that happen. And we were all ready to do it. But then we realized that we just had a bunch of other things that just needed to be done right now. And so translation went onto the back burner. But it is something that's really important to us. Not just because we want as many people to be able to play the game in their native language, but there's also the practical reason of we'd quite like to be eligible for all of the various awards that the Essen Awards. Your game needs to be published in German. There's the oh god, I'll probably butcher this. Juego de Anos, which is the Portuguese board game awards, and basically most countries do have their own award, and we want to be eligible for them so that we can slap them on every copy of Blood on the Clock Tower as an endorsement.
That was
we're just a small team, unfortunately.
That was a great Portuguese pronunciation with a strong Midlands accent.
Juego de Anos.
That sounds about how Americans might say it too.
Emma's question was, have you considered immediately transitioning to a first Thursday of the month schedule for character releases, which coincidentally will put the next one as being next week?
No, I think originally we were gonna do the last Thursday of each month, but then Brain very, very cleverly pointed out that if we if we make it the second to last Thursday of each month, if something goes wrong at this first one, we can try again next Thursday and still be within our time frames. So that seemed like a fair point. I don't know if we're going to do it on the second to last Thursday of each month from now on, or if we're just going to flip to the last one. But what I can tell you, and I'm very sorry to have to say this, it definitely won't be the first one.
Shame. Well, I tried, Emma. I tried. Sorry, Nini, were you going to say something?
Yeah, we have a question from Flying Ludicolo here.
Yeah.
The organ grinder has been added into the experimental almanac online. So the question is, do you know if there's any plans for all of those previously released non-Kickstarter characters, so things like the Widow or the Goblin, among several others? Is there any plans to get those added into the experimental almanac as well?
That's a really good question, and that's one that I think Ed would be able to answer. I would be very surprised if the answer to that is no. I mean, I can tell you for a fact that we would all like to have, obviously we'd like to have the documentation ready for every character, and if I could just click my fingers right now and make that happen, I don't think there'd be a single person in TPI or in the community who would be opposed to that. But it's just a case of time. Again, we're a small team, and there's just so many things that that just need to be done right now, that a lot of these things keep getting pushed onto the back burner. But what we're trying to achieve at the moment is for Steve, the game's designer, to not have to do anything but game design anymore, because right now he's managing a lot of business related stuff. He's dealing with trying to expand the game into new markets like in India and places like that. He's overseeing the script tool and website, which are both having a visual overhaul very shortly. He's talking to people about theaters, TV shows, book deals, things like this. And we really want to take all of that stuff off his plate so that he can focus on these things. But it's just a case of seeing these things out so that he can just go and make games and write almanac entries and excuse me, play test and develop the expansions. So yes, we do want to do that. Whether or not that will take the form of here's some more almanac entries for this experimental camera for this experimental character PDF, or if it will take the form of, well, hey, here's Midnight in the House of the Damned expansion and almanac for everything. I don't know, but yeah, we do want to do that as soon as possible, ideally.
Okay, cool. We had a follow-up question to one of the ones I asked earlier that I never got around to asking. In the absence of the release of an entirely new core script release, is there any support for providing supplementary material around new character releases that might help them be used or contextualized in the pool of available experimentals? I.e., which home script they're from, suggested character pairings, example TTVs, and so on. Basically, are you going to be offering any advice to script builders with new character release?
So, I think the idea really is that the script competitions that we're going to run with each character should be the opportunity to highlight some of those great interactions. The thing about having a brand new character come out is that, I mean, the Organ Grinder I've run quite a lot. I've been running the Organ Grinder for about 4 or 5 years now, so it's not a new character to me at all. But some of them that are going to be released are going to be new characters to me. Some of them are going to be new characters to all of us in TPI to some degree. Certainly, when the Atheist came out, that Atheist stream was my first time running the Atheist ever, and so I don't know. Ed doesn't know. Certainly, nobody in the community is going to know specifically what characters work well with the Atheist, because it's going to take time for us to all collectively discover all those cool little interactions. And it's going to take most of us making a bunch of, at best, mediocre scripts with some of these characters for us to all collectively start to learn where the sweet spots of it are. So I'm a little reticent to even give a great amount of script building advice for new characters, because I don't feel like qualified to do that with a lot of them. But I hope that by showing how they're run and picking some good scripts from a script contest, that we can all as a community start working that out together.
Right. So going forward, you've got plan to release a character a month for the foreseeable future. How long do you think you can reasonably expect to keep that going?
So we worked this out somewhere. I did it in a Patreon update. I said the exact number of characters we've got, right? That definitely was in a Patreon update. Let me have a quick look. Because
I've got the one. It is 114 townsfolk, 33 outsiders, 44 minions, 36 demons, for a total of 227 characters, including
227 divided by 12 is
about half of those are released already.
Okay, cool. So then we're probably looking at about 9 to 10 years worth of character releases if we were to just go a character a month, if we were to never develop any brand new characters, and if we were just releasing a character a month every month without stopping. We've got 9 or 10 years worth of characters just now that we can release. So I don't think, given that I'll be in my mid 40s by the end of that time, I think we're probably going to be okay for a while now. But the plan is hopefully to not just release a character a month, but release physical expansions, token packs, and continue developing Blood on the Clocktower with new and interesting characters. So how long can I see this going for? If I have my way, forever.
Does this process of releasing and testing and almanac entry writing and so on, and jinxing, how much of your resources as a company does that take away from achieving other things like those eventual script releases, expansion releases?
Well, I would say that the vast majority of the work required to release a new character on the tool is done by Ed, myself, and Stefan, aka Brain. Steve, the actual game designer in the company, isn't really involved to a large extent with any of that, except for the almanac writing part of it, which both Evan and Steve are keen to make sure Steve still does, because we really, well, they and us really want Steve to continue to be the guiding hand behind all things running Clock Tower, essentially. But other than those almanac entries, we're it's really not going to have an effect on those other things like developing expansions and stuff like that, because there's no reason for Steve there's no reason for Steve to be involved in he's not going to program the app, and he's not going to publicize the characters, and he's not going to run the stream and make the YouTube videos and talk to the community about it and stuff like that. So very few of his resources are going to be going into this.
That 227 characters only includes the main 4 types. It doesn't include any travelers or fable characters. So
there you go. Got a few in the back pocket then, guys.
Maybe a little bit extra on top of that.
Maybe we'll do a whole script that's just travelers and fabled. That'd be interesting.
We spoke to Steve a couple of weeks ago when he told us that he was considering a fabled character for each of the 3 subsequent expansions. Or considering scrapping that entirely and not making that not be a thing, but there's at least 3 that are at least being toyed with.
I've seen them. They're all in different stages of completion, but by far, I think the closest to completion is Midnight in the House of the Damned.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is missing, I think, like 2 or 3 characters need to be fit in there. Plus, obviously, there's work to be done on making sure all the ones that are in there play nice together. But it's not really far off at all, at least visually speaking.
That's interesting, because I think Steve's previously implied that he thinks that Garden of Sin is the closest.
No, well, I suppose he would know. I mean, and also, I'm just a layman, right? I've looked at the 3 scripts and seen that this one has more characters on it than the other ones. Therefore, it must be closer to completion. But I'm sure that his actual understanding of it is much more nuanced than that.
For sure. We don't have any more questions from chat, so chat, if you do have any last minute questions, then feel free to put them in. But I'm just going to go through a couple of things to close us out. Can you give us any idea? And if the answer to this is no, then that's fine. But can you give us any idea of like a hint or a tease as to what we might expect in the future? I have to try, right?
When you say what to expect in the future, what specifically do you mean?
Like the next couple of months of characters.
Well, what I can say is that
okay, I'll try. I'll let you think about it for a second while I ask you another perhaps slightly more specific question. Do you expect these ones to play nicely if you wouldn't have a access to the Stefan tool, or are you still keeping down the line of focusing on like really going for that sort of approach that takes?
No, we're not going to blow our app integration load too quickly here, I don't think, because there's only like 5 or 6 characters that really. I mean, there are many characters that can be helped by a bit of app integration. The spy, for example, you can run the spy without the app if you really, if you need to. You can just alt print screen on your computer or whatever. Or if you really want to, you can sit there and narrate to the spy in a private room what all the characters are. So we, if we consider the organ grinder now to be the bar by which we determine whether or not a character needs app integration, we've only got maybe 4, 5, 6 characters that I would say that's relevant for, and we want to save those for later. But what I can tell you is that the next month's character,
I don't want you to say going to get you in trouble here.
Yeah, you do. Put it this way: next month's character is one where you really, really cannot ignore this character at all. Like they are very, very in your grill, and if you do try to ignore them, you'll be royally screwed.
Okay.
Emma would like to know, Ben, if the hermit is the next character, can you blink twice? And because you are not on camera, I would like you to answer this in blinks.
Okay. What was the rules again? Sorry, I forgot already.
If the hermit is the next character, blink twice.
Okay, blink, blink, blink. 3 times. What are you going to do,
go.
Emma? Don't know anything.
That was technically twice.
No, it was 3. It was 3. No, I mean, I do like the hermit, but no, it's not the hermit. I'll tell you that much.
Okay. I think we can leave that very dangerous path there for now. 3 blinks, it does indeed include 2 by necessity.
But see, it also includes 1, and 1 came first, so the answer must be no.
Yeah, in your world here, Alejo, no one can ever say anything but 1.
It didn't say blink once for no, blink twice for yes. It said blink twice for yes. Therefore, anything else is a maybe. Okay. Yeah, is there anything else that you want to say while you've got this opportunity to talk about either the organ grinder or script building? Because this is a script building podcast usually, or Clock Tower in general.
Well, I'm really, really excited to come to Washington DC next month and meet a load of people.
Oh yeah, me too.
I'm a little. So when Emily and Kohav were sort of liaising with me about my schedule for the weekend, they were like, "Hey, when are you unavailable?" I'm like, "I'm available all the time because you brought me out here. But if you want to be really, really like accommodating, there's a football match on 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Saturday, which I'd like to." But don't worry about that too much. So they were like, "Hey, yeah, no worries at all." So they cleared that bit in my schedule, and then I noticed last week that the English Premier League have decided to move that game to Sunday.
How dare they?
The bastards!
How very dare
they? So yeah, I know that's not about script building, but I just wanted to express my extreme frustration that the world's most popular sport isn't all about me and what I want.
You could have like an earpiece in, so you're getting radio commentary while you're running a game.
To be honest with you, it's happening during one of the. I don't actually know what this means because it says it on the schedule, but I haven't looked up the meaning of it. But I think it was a fabled game or something. So what I've kind of thought might be fun is I might have the match on my phone. And have a custom Fable character in, which is every time Forest scores a goal, somebody gets resurrected.
If you're a Fable backer who's in one of Ben's games, this Clock Tower Con, know that there's a 50-50 chance that Ben does not care about your game in the slightest.
And also know that there's a very good chance that if we do use this Fable character, it will have no effect on the game at all because Forest are like 16th and they've got Man United on that day, so probably going to get battered.
We have a lot of speculation about what might be coming.
I bet we do. I probably should have said that.
From that hint. Kichi asks, will we get 2 new characters in April? 1 at Clock Tower Con and 1 on stream?
If you are an attendee, yes. If you're an attendee of Clock Tower Con, you'll get 2 new characters in April. The one that's going to be revealed on stream is not the same character that Clock Tower Con exclusive backers are getting.
We've got a bonus character.
It is a bonus character. We'll release it eventually, probably not a million years after Clock Tower Con, but it was quite important to us that it was something that those guys got a little bit of exclusivity with for at least a couple of months or whatever until it gets released on stream.
Well, all 3 of us will.
Yes, we will.
True.
So, yeah. Have fun if you're going to be there then. Yeah, people are now trying to give away their spots in that game because they don't need it anymore. I have 2 interesting questions that I've left for last.
Shoot.
The first one is, if you were to run Clock Tower, part of a charity fundraising event, do you have any fun ideas what you might do to incentivize people to donate to it? For instance, off meta and formerly used their former legacy mechanic of Delirium, Clock Tower. Connecticut Clock Tower had the Boon Daddy fabled Canadian. I'm sure you remember.
Yeah.
Do you have any fun ideas for how to raise money for a good cause?
That is interesting. You know, it might be interesting actually. Every time we hit a certain amount of donation, so maybe, I don't know, every £100 or every $1,000 or something, chat gets to vote on a new fabled character that we introduce. And we just keep introducing fabled characters until the game's a borderline unplayable nightmare. That might be interesting to see.
Well, you did have it wasn't for a charity event, but you did have the chat party fabled character that you once ran. I can't remember what you called it.
Was that so they get to vote for somebody to be drunk tonight or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. I remember that. That was a laugh.
We do have some questions from chat about when you say that the Clock Tower Con release character is going to be exclusive for attendees of Clock Tower Con. What exactly does that mean? Like, are Clock Tower Con attendees going to be getting like a physical token, or is it going to be available just to the attendees in the app somehow, but not to others? Or is it just that like we'll have access to playing it at the con and we'll have knowledge of it ahead of time?
I don't know what I'm allowed to say here, so let's just say what I want to say and then ask for forgiveness later if I shouldn't have said it. Clock Tower Con attendees will get a physical token.
Ooh, yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, very spicy.
They will get this character as a physical token. So you can get straight into playing with it. In fact, it's crossed my mind that I might show up with a pre-built script or something that I think plays quite nicely with it, so that not only can people use their brand new token straight away, but they don't even have to like mess around printing stuff off.
I know of at least 4 scripts that have been written, ready to go. And I'm sure that there will be more. So, yeah. Bambi asks if it will be available for purchase afterwards.
It's not going to be available for purchase immediately afterwards, because we are now figuring out exactly what the best way is to release new sets of characters. And until we've decided exactly how we're going to do that, we're not going to be able to. Obviously, we can't commit to having a load of tokens made up in a factory until we know exactly how we're going to go about selling those tokens. But obviously, eventually, everything will be available to purchase. It's just a case of waiting until we've got our internal policy set up for it. I think most people would agree that ideally we'd quite like those new expansions to be available. And then we'll know exactly what tokens are outside of those expansions, and we can just put on a kind of assorted experimental characters punch board. But yeah, for now, I'm afraid not, but not forever.
Okay. Chat, do you have any final questions for Father Benjamin?
Everybody seems to be agreeing that stream just ends now. That was like the peak ending question.
It was a good question, but I do have one final question. Ask. So if there are no other questions, then I will ask that, and we will end the stream with that as being the penultimate question. Milk asks it if you're still going to sign their face, which you have.
Yeah, if they want me to. I mean, honestly, it makes more sense to me that you want me to sign your face than your copy of the game, because you can wash my scribble off of your face, but your lovely shiny copy of Blood on the Clock Tower will forever be besmirched by my dog shit handwriting if you have me sign that.
2 things. 1, you just get the signature tattooed. And 2, Alejo, I can't believe you didn't read out their complete name, which is Moist Milk Paladin.
Moist Milk Paladin.
What? Now, hang on a minute. Why we've been asking me all these questions when we could have been discussing that What is a moist milk paladin? More importantly, what spells would a moist milk paladin be able to cast
Purify
other than
food
the
and drink.
usual, purify food and drink with moist milk? It's like a slightly shitty version of that spell where it's like, yeah, this food isn't rotten anymore, but it's just covered in milk, just soggy. Oh no, this apple's edible now, but it's got milk all over it. Would you eat an apple covered in milk?
I think they definitely know prestidigitation and the homebrew. I can't remember if it's a first level or a second level spell, or possibly even just a cantrip. Do you know egg?
No, I gotta look that up now. Egg.
Yeah, it's a great one. It can do weird things involving eggs.
Egg.
Well, the response from Moist Milk Paladin is, "Don't worry about it," and Milk Crusties is my primary spell.
There's a green text post on Reddit about it that I'll DM you.
I think I'm looking at it now.
Okay.
Have homebrew spell called egg.
That's the one.
When player holds up egg and shouts egg, roll a d6 and read effect from table. Well, this sounds like a terrible spell.
It's so bad. I love it.
This sounds like a really fun spell.
I do quite like shitty wizards. I feel like that doesn't get played often enough. Just like completely useless wizard. It's like, oh no, we're under attack by rampaging orcs. What can you do? Well, I can create 10 berries that will stop you from being hungry.
I'll give you 1 hit point.
Yeah, and it takes 1 action to eat each one individually.
I mean, we're focusing on spells. Paladins are third casters.
Yeah, what? Third casters?
Yeah, like they're not. They only have 1/3 of their spells. Like they are.
Oh,
third
I see.
casters.
Yeah, definitely. They're not primarily a spellcasting class, are they?
Can you imagine Moist Milk smiting?
Just get completely drenched in cottage cheese or something.
I mean, the new modern D&D paladin is a little bit moist milk sometimes. It's not as bad as the druid.
To be honest with you, I have kind of moved on from D&D these days. I'm a really big fan of the old school Renaissance, the OSR stuff. So I like to play a lot of old dungeon crawly, very deadly systems.
I've been really enjoying Dungeon World.
Yeah, Dungeon World is great, to be fair. It's really good. Have you ever played Morkborg? That's a good system.
I have not.
I haven't really either, but it is on my list of games that I would like to play.
It is really cool. It's like all about this dying world where you decide at the beginning of the campaign how close to the end of the universe you are. And depending on that, you then roll. So if you want it to be years away from the end of the world, you roll a D100 each morning. If you want it to be, months away, you roll a D12, etc., to the point where if it's days away, you roll a D4. And if you ever roll a 1, today is the day the world is ending. Your campaign ends today, regardless of where you are, regardless of what you're doing. If you're on anything but a 1, you consult the table of Psalms, where there are 99 sort of portents of the ending of time. So it can be like, for the whole of today, it rains frogs, and anybody who's outside has like this restriction on what they can see. It's a really cool way to just shake up your campaign.
Have you played The Quiet Year?
I can't say I have. No, what's that one about?
It's an art-based RPG where you don't play as like characters or anything. We've played it on stream before for long-time viewers. You play as like a community between you, and you have to. The Frost Shepherds are coming in a year. They're coming in winter, and you have to decide what your community does over the course of a year. But the main restriction is that you cannot talk about what's happening. You draw cards, answer questions, and then you get to decide what happens. The only communication that you can have between the players is that once per turn you can do an action. That action can be doing something. It can also be like having a group discussion, but even then, you're only allowed to say 1 sentence. It's a really cerebral RPG that's well worth a try.
Oh, that sounds really cool. I think I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds like the sort of thing you can play with non-RPG enthusiasts as well, which is quite nice.
Yeah, we played it. I played it a couple of times. It's a game. I said this wasn't an RPG stream. Here we are.
I mean, Clock Tower is quite close to an RPG. It's about as close as you can get without, like, well, it's just not quite an RPG, right? But if it had one more RPG-like element, I think you would be able to call it an RPG.
Yeah, I think so. All right. We didn't have any more questions, so I will put my final question to you, Ben.
This has been your like 8th final question.
Oh,
However, I'm happy to keep talking for another 2 hours if you want. So don't feel like you have to call things on my account.
I've had this question lined up to go for the final one since it's up the stream, really. Just such a good question that I got. If you could play Clock Tower with anyone, dead or alive, what would your table be?
Oh, fuck me. That is such a good question.
I know, right?
I can see why you saved this one for last.
That's a question from Flying Ludicolo, who asked a couple of other questions that we've had before.
Okay. Well, I feel like there are two sorts of people who I would want to form a big circle of Clock Tower players with, living or dead. There's really like articulate, entertaining, socially fun people. You know, people like Stephen Fry, who you're going to have a good time if you play any game with a guy like that. Then there's the really like scheming, like almost totalitarian or expert general maneuverer kind of people. So people like Niccolo Machiavelli, he would be so good at Clock Tower. Caesar, George S. Patton, Field Marshal Montgomery, whatever the hell his face was, who was in World War II. Those guys, I reckon, would be tactically really good to play against. Actually, to be fair, I'd like to mash them together. So here's my short list. Stephen Fry's in there. Edgar Allan Poe. He would just be. This game is made for him and his imagery. He would be so good at this. I'd probably Niccolo Machiavelli's got to be in there. Julius Caesar. He would be sick at this. In fact, the vast majority of anyone who was ever part of the Roman Senate would probably be really good at Blood on the Clock Tower. I'd throw Genghis Khan in there just because I imagine he would be a laugh. I've always wanted to meet Kurt Cobain, so we're going to resurrect him, even though I think he'd probably suck at Clock Tower. I want to say H.P. Lovecraft, but I'd be kind of worried that he'd just go off on a racist tangent, so I'd probably leave him out, even though
he would.
Even though I do really, really enjoy his work. Mary Wollstonecraft. I don't know if you've ever if you're familiar with Mary Wollstonecraft.
Yep.
But she was an excellent writer and orator. Speaking of Marys, Mary Shelley, I think, would be an excellent addition to any circle. She's certainly got the gothic chops for it.
When you got to go with that mother-daughter combo, right?
Yeah, I suppose we could, couldn't we? That would be that would be an interesting. I wonder if they would like. You know, when you see like a parent and their child play at the same time in Clock Tower, it always goes one of two extremes. It's always either, my kid's definitely telling the truth. You know, he wouldn't be able to do this, or he's definitely lying. I know what he's like when he's lying. He's definitely lying now. And whichever one that parent goes for, it's always the wrong one, invariably.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably put Rosa Parks in that game as well, actually. Because I reckon she'd be pretty forceful when it comes to defending herself from accusations from evil players.
Yeah, I think you definitely want Parks or Lovecraft.
Yeah, not both. Definitely not both. Do you know what? Judas Iscariot, actually.
Okay.
He'd probably be quite good at Clock Tower.
That is quite a list. Who's your storyteller?
Bob Marley.
Aphrodisiac says that Douglas Adams goes on the wish list for anything.
Oh, Douglas Adams, yeah, that would be such a yeah. Do you know what? Gary Gygax as well. Actually, I wouldn't mind having him in the. I'd have him be the storyteller. Actually, I think he'd probably do a good job.
So here's something that I put to Ed when we had him on. But Ed is Fuck, I've forgotten his name. What's his name? Rules
I
guy.
hope
Is
you're
it
not
Ed?
asking me because I don't remember anything.
Hold on. Give me a second.
Is this a historical figure?
No.
No, it's a gaming figure.
Jeremy Crawford, that's the one. Ed is Jeremy Crawford. Steve is Gary Gygax. You're Matt Mercer. How do you feel about
Matt Mercer. What an insult to Matt Mercer that was.
that? Ed seemed to like the idea.
Yeah, well, what? So you were giving TPI members various board game personalities?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically D&D personalities.
Oh, specifically D&D. All right. Okay. Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're probably going to wrap that up there. I don't think that we could have had a better final couple of planned questions, or better final 3 questions than everyone who goes to ClockTowerCon is getting a token. Moist Milk is a paladin that casts egg, and that's Ben's dream clock tower rotation. So yeah, I think that will do us. We're going to run some games tomorrow. Usually we run the script that we talk about, so I guess we might run Boozling, or we might just run 2 Organ Grinder games back to back. Who knows? Nadine and I have written absolutely bonkers script to put with the Organ Grinder tomorrow, so you don't want to miss that one. Nadine, where can people find you?
You can find me here every other Monday and on Tuesdays, occasionally on Fridays. And on Fridays, you can find me at Connecticut Blood on the Clock Tower Twitches stream.
I would ask you the same question, Ben, but if you know me, you know Ben. So, Ben, anything you want to plug?
Well, I mean, I suppose we've got our regular streams and our YouTube channel. Actually, do you know what I've been thinking about? Because I'm really beginning to, over the last few years of streaming, I really have learned to love streaming. Something that I wasn't really, bothered about at all prior to doing it for TPI. But I'm thinking about starting a side channel where I do for Clock Tower, where I do for Blood Bowl what I currently do for Clock Tower. So I'll play the game, I'll explain all the things I'm doing, I'll try and teach people to play Blood Bowl. So I wonder if that would be of interest to anyone. But if it would, and if people say it would, then I think I'll probably start doing it soon. So yeah, there you go. I'm going to plug my own little side channel there.
Well, you already
we got a couple of people in chat who already say that they would watch it.
Yeah, I've already decided as well that I'm gonna play a human team, and my one little halfling will be John Gracie, and my team's gonna be called No Bloods Bold, and Adam Blampier is gonna be a big ogre.
Oh dear. Anyway, we've also got a script competition. We have asked people to write a script that makes use of the Fibbin Fable character. Because the Fibbin doesn't get enough love, and we want to see what you can do. We'll give you a deadline tomorrow, but it will definitely be at least next Thursday. So you're going to have at least 10 days to think about it. Have you ever written or run or played a script for Fibbin, Ben Baketon?
No, I don't think I have, to be honest with you. In fact, I can't even remember what the Fibbin does. I'm going to say.
Once per game, a good player might receive false information. Incorrect.
Oh yeah, I have played with the Fibbin before. Yeah, that is quite interesting. It's particularly good for scripts that don't have enough poisoning or drunkenness, isn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely one way to build with it, and it's the typical way. So yeah, that's a good strategy. So do join us on tomorrow. We'll be running at least one Organ Grinder game, and either another Organ Grinder game or Boozling. And also we'll tell you when the script competition closes tomorrow. On Friday, right before Connecticut Blood on the Clock Tower, well, on Thursday, Ben, will you be running games on Thursday?
I'll be running games on Thursday's stream.
Cool. So do tune in there. I don't know if I'm going to be there. I think I am. I think I'm in game 2 this week. So I might see you there. I might not. I might be. And Friday we'll be playing The King's Dilemma this week, hopefully, and then that will lead into Connecticut's Blood on the Clocktower games. Do you know what you're doing, Navian, or is that to be decided?
For this week?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Habby ran a mastermind script competition, so we are running the script winners of that.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. You've got Maya games for the Clocktower competition this week, Ben. That's what you're doing.
Oh yeah, we are doing the Clocktower contest this week. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm quite looking forward to that.
Yeah. I noticed this and I posted it on the Clocktower Con Discord server. But it's rather unfortunate that the Maya character token design put on the hoodie when I get back to the Netherlands where I live will make me look like a far right supporter of the far right party. But that's unfortunate. But you know.
What's the name of the party that has that logo? I want to see it.
It is FVD.
FVD party. Oh, Forum for Democracy. Oh wow, yeah, that does look like. Yeah. Okay.
But that's fine. I'll only have to spend 10-minute conversation every time somebody pulls me up on it, explaining, "No, I'm not a racist. It's a board game thing." Yeah. I'm looking forward to that Clocktower Con and all of the lovely people that we'll get to meet. But yeah, see you tomorrow, and then of course we'll be back on Sunday doing some nonsense, probably with an. But we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great week, and yeah, good night, chat. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.